If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 41, The Chase. Galloway Forest, May 5, 2000. MCPOV. I appeared once again in the forest where my labor deer was hiding. Before starting my hunt, I decided to take out my magic compass, with the thought a tendril shot from my shadow compass on its end. I thought of any object that would help Thalia, but as I looked down at the compass, the needle just kept on spinning and spinning as if it didn't know what to do. I tried thinking of the deer, and soon the compass directed me west. If there was a way to help save Thalia, the compass couldn't help me find it. I sunk once more into my shadow, then I appeared once again in another corner of the woods. There the deer stood grazing. I summoned my shadowy tendrils, sending them towards the deer once more. The deer phased through the ensnaring tendrils. "Let the hunt begin," I whispered, trying to not think about Thalia or the compass. Day 15. The hind's elusive form flickered through the dense foliage of Galloway Forest, its ethereal grace a stark contrast to the gnarled trees. I teleported from shadow to shadow, my heart pounding in sync with the pulsating darkness that enveloped me. Each time I emerged, the hind was just a blur ahead, its form shimmering as it phased through tree trunks and leapt over streams. Day 46. The chase continued through Scotland and northern England, the deer trying to shake me off his trail by creating long patterns. But it obviously hadn't worked. I continued at its tail, eating and drinking from the supplies in my shadow in the small time I could manage. Day 90. The hind continued running as we made it to a beach, but the hind didn't stop to rest and kept in running. It started running across the water, and as I saw it run away from me, I recalled the last time I had gone into water and how that hadn't exactly gone so well. As I approached the water, I noticed the shadows and darkness formed by the waves and the refraction of light, and so I decided to try something. Concentrating on those shadows, I sunk into my own. Then I started to control my actions so as to not reappear in my bodily form, but rather start moving in my shadow form as I had decided to call it. It took a few tries, but soon I succeeded in the chase through water once again. Day 120. We finally crossed the huge expanse of water northeast of England, finally reaching another landmass which I was able to figure out was Norway according to some signs which thankfully were in English. As the chase continued, I recalled how in a Heracles' labor it took him more than a full year to tire out the hind, and I couldn't help but think how long I was going to take. Day 180. 6 months had passed, yet the hind showed no signs of stopping as we traveled at super speeds, first through Norway, crossing Sweden, Finland, and then entering Russia. It seemed as if we were circumventing the entirety of Europe itself. My chase though got even tougher as the more time passed. More and more monsters seemed to keep popping up almost every time I attacked the hind and forced it to phase. In one's case even griffins flew down to attack me. Day 270. The hind I then crossed through Russia in the tempering cold. Thankfully I was protected from it by my Caledonian sweater which lit up and warmed me. From Russia we crossed into Poland, a place which seemed to be filled with even more monsters than before as Dragons kept on finding the hind and myself. Day 360. Almost a full year had gone by since the start of my hunt. From Poland we crossed into Germany, a place which seemed to be filled with witches. In fact, I even got a close call with Medea once as she tried to enchant me into sleeping with her. Pretty weird since I was 12. Still, the most important part in this territory is that I could visibly tell the hind was starting to slow down. At time each phased it took even more effort from the hind, its panting a symphony to my ears which signified the end of my quest was near. Day 450. The hind and I then finished crossing Germany, and most of France. I could feel it. It wouldn't be long before my labor would be complete, and as the thought of it came to my mind, a wide grin appeared on my face as I sent my shadowy tendrils once again towards the hind, forcing it to phase through them once again. Day 489. Finally we started crossing through the mountain range that bordered France and Spain. We had reached the Pyrenees. The hind saw a river scaling down its water and couldn't help but get nervous. I didn't know why, but maybe it was having flashbacks to its quest with Heracles, since the Greek hero had also led it to a river. The hind, with the last of its strength, leapt towards the water, phasing one final time. I followed suit, my tendrils reaching out, ensnaring it. The slighty giant deer tried vibrating as hard as it could, but it didn't have the strength because of the long chase. It couldn't phase through my tendrils. Gotcha! I whispered in triumph as I pulled the deer towards me, locking its legs and mouth with my tendrils finally sitting on its locked form. You were one hell of a pain, I said to the deer as it continued wriggling slyly in my tendrils as in defiance. But don't worry, I will let you go when my labor is complete, no harm done. I whispered to the deer once again. It looked at me with a face of incredulity at my words, as if asking me if I was being sarcastic. Don't look at me like that, you were the one who kept on running. I finished saying to the deer's face, which once again was filled with incredulity at my words. Greek myth fact: today's fact will be about the hind itself, since I feel it is one of the cooler mythological monsters. The Cyrenean hind was a golden horned deer sacred to the goddess Artemis. Heracles was sent to fetch it as one of his 12 labors. After chasing the animal for a full year, he finally captured it on Mount Artemision in Arcadia. The goddess Artemis complained about the treatment of her deer, whose horn had broken off by the hero in the struggle. He nevertheless managed to persuade her to let him borrow it for the completion of his labor. According to some, the hind was one of 5 golden horned deer gifted to Artemis by the nymph Aegit. The other 4 drew the chariot of the goddess. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 42, Deer Caught, Camp Ruins. Pyrenees, October 4, 2001. Ha, ha, 5 finally I caught you. I said between heaving breaths as I looked upon the mythical deer ensnared at my feet by my shadow tendrils, too tired from our chase to phase through them. As my tiredness from our continued chase finally settled in, I closed my eyes, still holding onto the legendary hind. Odysseus dreamscape, unknown time. I once again appeared in an infinitely large space, with millions of eyes looking at it, meaning I had completed my quest. Good job, son. My father's voice trembled through the space. I didn't reply to my father's words. Instead, I just asked him something which I had been meaning to ask for more than a year. Is there a way to return Thalia to her human form? Yes. My father replied as the eyes shook at his words. Please tell me. I pleaded towards my godly parent. You shouldn't worry about her, everything will come in due time. My father replied. Please. I pleaded once again, tears falling from my eyes and falling to my knees in this shadowy place. Sadly, I cannot. My father once again, his voice wavering slightly. Please. I pleaded once more. I can't. My father once again replied as a tendril with a hand materialized at my side and placed its hand on my hand. I fell silent and cried, thinking that maybe even if it was a slight chance my godly father would have helped me. After what felt like an infinite long time of silence and my eyes had wrung dry, I stood up and asked, fine, what is my next quest then? My father sighed as he replied, you must heal the 3 mortals wounded by Apollo's snake. This labor is based on Asclepios, another of Chiron's students and the god of medicine. As for your hint, they will all be in hospitals in the USA in their ICUs. I nodded after hearing his words, then with my own thoughts I sunk into the ground. I once again regained consciousness, but I realized I wasn't in the place where I had fallen from exhaustion. Right now I was in a rundown wooden house, which seemed eerily similar to a cabin hanging over a boiling pot. With a thought I sunk into the darkness on the roof. Appearing at the doorway of the cabin, I used my sight and noticed something. This place had 12 cabins, all run down with overgrowing moss. The weirder thing was that in all these cabins and on the outside were tens of Cyclops. It looked like a group of Cyclops had taken a base in an ancient camp Half-Blood. The Cyclops seemed to have noticed my escape, as they all suddenly started smelling the air and turned to face the cabin in which I was previously hanging. Well, at least I can let off some steam. I deadpanned as I summoned my spear into my hand. Roa. Tens of Cyclops roared as they rushed at the cabin in which I was previously going to be cooked, which now that I looked at it seemed similar to the big house at Camp Half-Blood. I used the shadows and teleported myself behind the last shadow, lunging with my spear and immapling his head with my spear, its body bursting into dust. The Cyclops seemed confused for a few moments at the sight of their fallen companion, but they swiftly recovered from their confusion, their red aura flaring up in anger. But I paid no heed to their animal and guttural roar. I just sunk back into the shadow, appearing once again behind another Cyclops, lunging forwards and immapling his torso. 2 close Cyclops noticed my location and smashed their huge clubs at me, as they let out angry roars. Still they couldn't catch me unprepared. 4 of my tendrils quickly appeared from my shadow as 2 grabbed the clubs while the other 2 tips sharpened impaled the Cyclops. All 3 Cyclops turned to dust almost simultaneously. You will pay for this, demigod, one of the Cyclops roared. Yeah, I am already hated by your father, don't think this is gonna do much of a difference. I replied to the Cyclops in indifference as I once again sunk into the shadows. Our battle continued, the Cyclops clumsily and angrily trying to smash me with their clubs each time I reappeared, but it was for nothing. My spear and tendrils kept on killing the Cyclops one by one, until finally the last one was left. "Come on, demigod, fight me honorably," the last Cyclops yelled. "Well, isn't that ironic?" I laughed as I reapered from a shadow. "You didn't fight honorably either, you tried jumping me, hell you even caught me while I was sleeping, so don't go whining now," I continued. The Cyclops slightly growled at my words and dashed at me. I pushed my back foot against the ground, cracking it slightly, and met the Cyclops head on. Soon we were face to face. The Cyclops slammed his wooden club downward, but I just moved slyly to the side, evading the strike, and lunged, putting my entire force behind it. Few's share. My spear impaled the Cyclops' eye, and through its head. The Cyclops let go of his club, a loud thud ringing out. In a moment the Cyclops' body burst into dust. In place of where the Cyclops previously stood, now just a simple tooth lay with a slight amount of mist surrounding it. "Well, that is disappointing," I said as I thought that maybe I would get something better from my efforts, which wasn't a lot. I decided not to grab it, and started inspecting the place in which I was in, now with 26 clubs laying on the floor. I inspected each cabin. Each seemed almost identical to the cabins at Camp Half-Blood, just more used and ancient. It honestly felt weird seeing everything be the same, but no demigods in it. I couldn't find anything interesting to put into my shadow, so I decided to start on my newest labor, with a clear destination in mind. I thought of the Empire State Building, which I had visited with the campers a few times before, then I sunk into the shadows beneath me. Greek myth fact: today's fact will be about Asclepios, since I don't think he is well known. Asclepios was the son of Apollo and the Trichyan princess Kronos. His mother died in labor, and when she was laid out on the pyre, Apollo cut the unborn child from her womb. From this Asclepios received his name, which means to cut open. Asclepios was raised by the centaur Chiron, who instructed him in the art of medicine. He grew so skilled in the craft that he was able to restore the dead to life. This was a crime against the natural order, and so Zeus destroyed him with a thunderbolt. After his death, Asclepios was placed amongst the stars as the constellation Ophiuchus. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 43, The First Patient. New York, October 4, 2001. I emerged from the shadows into the bustling streets of New York City, my senses tingling with anticipation. As I reappeared, I thought once again of the magic compass I had been given more than a year and a half ago. With a flick of my wrist, a tendril grew from my shadow, bringing the compass from my shadow to my hand. I started thinking about the ill people I needed to cure for my newest labor. Slowly the needle quivered, started moving, and finally settled, pointing steadfastly in a direction, southwest. Without hesitation, I called upon the shadows once more, allowing them to envelop me as I prepared to teleport to my next destination. In an instant, I found myself standing amidst the vast expanse of Texas in a desert, the sun's heat beating down on me. Glancing down at my compass, I noted its new direction, now pointing north and slightly east. With a determined resolve, I continued my teleportation, each jump bringing me closer to my ultimate destination. From shadow jump to shadow jump, I continued teleporting between the differing states, trying to locate the state in which a person was ill. It was a boring process, and each jump took a lot of my stamina as I kept on teleporting between the different states. Finally I was able to trim down the location until I was able to locate one of the ill people was in Tennis, since whenever I passed it the compass changed directions towards it. 4 months later. A few months later I kept on searching through the state of Tennis, little by little, until I was finally able to locate the hospital where it seemed the patient was hospitalized. I surrounded myself with mist, making myself invisible to the mortal eye. I looked at the compass, following it around the corridors. I stepped into the hospital's ICU. I entered a room where a man with a dim orange aura around him, and a slight yellow around him as well. The man turned to face me, his eyes widening. He then asked with a slight cough, "You shouldn't be in here, kid. Actually, how the hell did you get in? You can see me, interesting." I commented to myself. Have you always been able to see through the mist, or is it a side effect of the snake bite? I questioned to myself. Wait, how do you know about my snake bite? The doctors themselves said that it isn't that. The man asked me as his eyes widened. So the snake bite is also invisible to mortals? I concluded, when the door to the room suddenly opened as 2 nurses came in. The nurses started changing his droppers at his side. "Hey, can you see that kid? The man asked towards a nurse by his bedside as he pointed at me. The nurse turned to look at the place where the man was pointing, where I was standing. No Robert, I can't. Do you see anything else in the room? The nurse asked with a clear tone of worry in her voice. What do you mean you can't see him? He is right there. The patient, who I now knew was Robert, continued saying while I just stayed silent with a slight smile on my face at his actions. The other nurse at the other side suddenly pressed a button on the wall. Dr. Smith to ICU room 24, Dr. Harris to room 24. Why are you calling the doctor? I am as fine as I was yesterday. Can you please take the kid out of this room? He is stressing me out. Robert started saying with a slight tone of worry in his own voice. Soon an old woman wearing a doctor's coat with an orange and greenish aura around her entered the room. Robert, Dr. Harris said, her voice gentle yet authoritative. How are you feeling today? Robert's eyes turned towards her and he talked to her. Doc, you know how I feel, the same as before. Like I've been run over by a herd of stampeding buffalo. Dr. Harris chuckled. Well, we'll try to make that feeling a bit more bearable. She adjusted the foreline, her gloved hands deft and practiced. We've run every test imaginable, but nothing seems to explain your hallucinations. Robert's gaze shifted to the corner of the room, where I stood, my mist-woven form still hidden from mortal sight. What about him? He asked, his voice hoarse. The kid over there. He's been watching me. Dr. Harris followed his gaze, her brow furrowing. Robert, there's no one there. You're feverish, and your mind is playing tricks on you. But he talks to me, Robert insisted. He knows about the snake bite. Said it's invisible to mortals. Dr. Harris exchanged a glance with the nurse, who looked equally perplexed. Robert, she said gently, you're not making sense. There's no kid here, and you don't have a snake bite. We already checked on your first day here. I stepped closer, my curiosity piqued. Robert's aura shimmered a mix of orange and yellow, like a fading sunset. His connection to the mist because of Apollo's snake was undeniable. Robert, I whispered, my voice remaining unheard by mortals. With the help of the mist, I can help you. His eyes widened, and he coughed, clutching his chest. Who are you? Call me Asclepios, I replied. Someone who was tasked with healing you. Your snake bite, it's magical in nature. You were wounded by a divine snake. Dr. Harris and the nurses exchanged alarmed glances. Robert, Dr. Harris said firmly, you need rest. We'll adjust your medication. No. Robert's voice cracked. Listen to me. The kid. Enough, Dr. Harris interrupted. We'll discuss this later. The doctor and nurses finished adjusting his medication, and they left the room with somber looks on their faces, probably because he was getting worse. Well, now we can get down to business without you going all crazy, can't we? I questioned Robert as I approached his bed. How are you going to heal me? Robert asked with a sigh in resignation. I am not so sure myself. It is the first times I am going to do this. I replied while I scratched the back of my head. Wait, you don't know? Robert questioned me once more. Hey, I am just a kid. It's good enough that I am going to heal you. Just let me have some time. I replied to my first patient. Don't yell. We don't want the doctors thinking you are crazy. I said with a wide grin as I summoned my shadow tendrils. Greek myth fact. Today's fact will be about Diomedes, a Greek hero in the Iliad. Honestly, I almost named my MC Diomedes just because of how badass this dude is. Diomedes is one of the main heroes on the Greek side in the Trojan War. He is also known as Second Achilles just because of his sheer dominance. He makes his appearance in Book 5 and is given the ability to see between gods and humans by Athena. He then goes on to demolish almost every mortal on the battlefield and even wound Aphrodite, later with the help of Athena. Diomedes also battles Ares and stabs his entrails, making the god of war flee back to Zeus. I really recommend you guys to read more about him. The dude is a beast XD. Author note, I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 44, End of the Fourth. Hospital in Tennessee, February 6, 2002. 1 week later. Okay, let's try this one more time, I muttered, clasping my hands as the room's shadows converged around me. My summoned tendrils snaked toward Robert, their inky forms weaving a delicate dance. Again, come on, Robert grumbled. What do you want me to say? Sorry. I shot back, sarcastically towards my first patient. Well, it wouldn't hurt, Robert retorted. Finally, the shadows encircling his body transformed into fine threads, slipping through his every pore. As I continued weaving the shadow threads into him, I sensed the familiar resistance which I had slowly been extracting from Robert's body, the poison. The poison circling through his bloodstream, I controlled the shadowy threads to cling onto the poison. The toxin resisted, clinging to the veins and arteries, as hard as it could. "Come on, Robert, let's try to make this the last time you have to go through this," I whispered, my breath mingling with the shadows. Robert nodded, wanting the poison out of his body and for him to finally cured. I had killed things, but this was the first time I was going to heal someone with the use of my powers. As I continued weaving the shadow threads into him, I sensed the familiar resistance, growing exponentially as my threads gathered more and more of the poison from his bloodstream. Robert's breath hitched. His body trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. The shadows burrowed deeper, seeking out the all of the toxin's remains. "Almost there," I murmured. My concentration on this task resolute and focused like never before. Finally, as I sensed that I had picked all the remaining poison, I decided to start the extraction. The threads pulled it free, inch by agonizing inch. Robert's body convulsed, and he retched, bile splattering the sheets. But it was a victory, the venom dripping along the shadowy threads. I summoned a bottle from my shadow which I had already filled with some of the venom and placed the final remnants into it. I released the threads, watching as they dissipated into nothingness. Robert collapsed, gasping for air. His skin was pallid, but his eyes held a glimmer of hope. "You did it," he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Thank you." I nodded, my own relief flooding through me. Soon nurses started invading room at the commotion which we had just caused, but as I was shrouded in mist they weren't able to see me. A nurse quickly asked, "Did it happen again?" as she checked the room and bed sheets now filled with the stench of vomit. "Yes, but don't worry, I am feeling much better now," Robert replied with a joyous smile on his face. "Don't say that, we are calling Dr. Harris so she can check you once more." Another nurse said worriedly, "Okay, but I am feeling much better, so I don't think it is necessary." As the nurses argued between Robert and themselves about his condition, which I had already fixed, I slipped out of the room unnoticed even by Robert, as it seemed he had lost the ability to see through the mist as his eyes no longer tracked me as they did before unconsciously. I then made my way out of the hospital and sighed to myself as I stretched my arms behind my neck. "Well, that is one down, just 2 more to go." With that, one of my tendrils gave me my compass once more and I teleported to a northern state, since that is where it was pointing now. 10 months later. "Well, and we are finally done here, you now just need to rest until you finally recuperate," I said to the small 6-year-old girl as I patted her head, a small smile on my face. "Thank you, guardian angel," she replied. "I told you already I am not a guardian angel." I laughed once more at her words. "But you are, you cured me," she argued as she puffed out her cheeks in disagreement. I just said my final goodbyes to the small girl which I had been treating for just over 2 weeks, since she had the most amount of poison out of any of the 3 patients I had treated, probably because it took me almost 10 months to find her. Then I thought once more about Camp Half-Blood, more specifically about Thalia. Soon I sunk into my own shadow, teleporting to her tree. "Hey Thalia!" I sighed as I looked upon the pine tree which had grown even much more over my past 2 labors. "Sorry that I haven't come in a while, I know I probably should have come visited you sooner," I couldn't help but say as I placed my hand on the pine's trunk. "But I do think I have the power to help you," I added. I clasped my hands and with practiced ease the darkness and shadows surrounding me started encircling her tree. I manipulated the shadows, transmorphing them into fine tendrils, inserting them through the tree's pores, the stomata. I continued manipulating the threads etching through every inch of the tree. Soon I made it Thalia's figure, which seemed to be trapped by the tree itself. My tendrils soon noticed something blocking their path. I stretched my threads trying to pierce through what was blocking my shadowy threads. I continued forcing my threads through, but suddenly the restraints around her body responded, zapping all my threads, evaporating them. It could work. I noticed. I just need to grow more powerful to break your restraints. "Don't worry Thalia, I will heal you soon, even if it is the last thing that I do." I pressed my back against the pine tree, wanting to feel closer to her, even if it was just by doing this, since we could no longer talk to one another. A drowsy feeling started coursing through my body, as I closed my eyes, letting sleep claim me. "Odysseus dreamscape, time uncown. Let me sleep in peace," I said as I noticed I had once more been transported, in which I talked to my father as the millions of eyes rummages around. Son, you have done a good job completing your 4th labor, but I advise not to heal Thalia. My father's primordial voice resounded across the space. Well, isn't that interesting, but I think not. I replied to the biggest eyes I normally talk to. Fine, it was for your own good anyway. My fatherly father sighed at my response. So what is my next labor? I questioned the giant eye. For your 5th labor you must slay the entire Gorgon trio: Medusa the Queen, Stheno the Migthi, and Euryale the Far-Springer. Based on deeds from Perseus. Didn't Perseus only kill Medusa? I said sarcastically to my father, maybe so, but you are more powerful than him, so you must slay the entire trio. Okay, fine, let's do this. I finished sinking once more into the shadowy floor. Greek myth fact: today's fact will be about the Gorgon trio, the original myth, so no Medusa being cursed by Athena because either sleeping or being r***ped by Poseidon. In the most famous Greek myths, the Gorgons were 3 sisters with coiling snakes for hair, who could turn unwitting onlookers to stone in an instant. Their names were Stheno, meaning the mighty or strong, Euryale, meaning the far-springer, and Medusa, the queen or guardian. In Greek myth they are described as terrible monsters with hair made from writhing, venomous snakes, along with golden wings, boar-like fangs, scaly skin, and long tongues. The Gorgon sisters were one of several triumvirates, groups of 3, in Greek mythology, who shared similar mystical powers among their group. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 45, Stheno and Euryale. 3 months later, Frieren and Fernost, Height of Magic EP 26. USA, March 16, 2003. Welp, any monsters in here? I yelled as I look around a huge stone mansion which the compass had guided me to, though the yelling was slightly rhetorical since I could clearly see through my vision that 2 monsters were upstairs lounging about. The 2 very same monsters sniffed the air as they had probably heard my question and quickly made their way to me, something which I found slightly amusing since it was like driving a moth to flame. Soon 2 monster women with snakes for hair in their head, eagle-like wings, boar-like fangs, long claws, scaly skin, forked tongues and a huge red aura surrounding them, one much bulkier than the other, appeared from one of the many doors inside of the chamber I was in. It's been a while since we had a guest, hasn't it, sis? The bulkier of the Gorgons questioned, a wide grin forming on her face. Indeed, and even more so one that smells is this good. The other Gorgon replied. Yeah, okay, that is weird, so please don't talk like that. I interjected as I noticed how their eyes scanned me all over as if they were undressing me. Oh, and petrification doesn't work on you. The bigger Gorgon added as we both looked at each other. Duh, I am blind. I finished speaking. It doesn't matter, you will die all the same. The smaller Gorgon hissed, as she suddenly jumped at me at amazing speeds, but I just teleported away. Weren't there supposed to be 3 of you? I asked. Medusa lives on her own, she is weird, though we don't judge her for it. The bulkier Gorgon replied. So then I am guessing you are Stheno the Mighty and you are Euryale the Far-Springer. I directed to each of the Gorgons. Euryale didn't seem to want to answer me as she flapped the wings on her back and once more dashed at me, faster than most monsters could even move. Still, I just teleported to another place before she could reach me. Also, what kind of pseudonym is Far-Springer? I mean, not to be rude, but it seems like you drew on the short end of the stick compared to your sisters. Euryale didn't seem to appreciate my words as she hissed at me once more before flying in my direction, yet I just teleported once more. Still, as fast as I reappeared she followed, changing her flight path and trying to crash into me. I just sighed, expecting more from one of the 3 legendary Gorgons, as I summoned the spear out of my tattoo, sidestepped her lunge and just slashed down with the tip of my spear, decapitating her on the spot as she burst into dust with just the head remaining. Well, that is disappointing. I muttered aloud. Stheno, who previously had a smug grin on her face even as she saw I could teleport, now turned serious, probably not expecting one of her sisters, even if she was the weakest one, to be defeated so easily. No screams of sorrow for your sister. I mocked to Stheno the Mighty, probably the strongest of the 3 Gorgons. She will be back one day, unlike you. Stheno hissed back at me. Solid reasoning. I added as she flapped her wings. I controlled the shadows to go into me, strengthening me. As Stheno prepared to engage, I felt a surge of power coursing through me as the shadows melded into my being, fortifying my strength higher than even kids of Ares could achieve. Stheno lunged forward with incredible speed, her bulky form hurtling towards me like a freight train. I sidestepped her attack, her sharp claws whizzing past a few inches above my face. Shadowy tendrils swirled around me. In a swift motion, I manipulated my tendrils to go after Stheno, encircling and ensnaring her ankles, arms, and neck. But Stheno was no ordinary opponent. As she suddenly heaved, bulking up and growing twice as big, escaping the shackles which I had placed around her. The ground trembled as she charged at me once more, her boar-like tusks aimed at my chest. I teleported to the other edge of the stone room, narrowly avoiding the deadly assault. "You're faster than I expected," Stheno growled, her voice echoing through the stone chamber. "So are you," I complimented back to the monster, who almost touched the 4-meter-tall ceiling. "Still, young demigod, you won't be able to escape me forever," Stheno hissed at me. I smirked, my own abilities surging. The tendrils around me sharpening at my command. "Well, you are probably wrong about that, since I could escape you right now, but still potato. I couldn't help but give the Gorgon a reality check, since with my teleportation I could escape from almost any situation. With a thought, I summoned my spear once more. The Pelian spear's blade, hungry for even more monster blood, or at least that is what I like to imagine myself. I lunged at Stheno, aiming for her head. She parried with her massive claws, sparks flying as metal clashed against scales. But I was relentless. Each strike was calculated, aimed at weakening her defenses. I pivoted around her, my movements fluid and precise. Stheno roared, her wings flapping in frustration. She swung her left arm at me, her claws ready to bisect me like a kebab. I ducked, feeling the rush of air as it missed me by mere inches. Then, seizing the opportunity, I drove my spear into her side. The blade sank deep, piercing through her thick hide. Stheno staggered, blood oozing from the wound. But she didn't falter. Instead, she grinned a terrifying sight with her boar-like fangs, as she bit down with her fangs, which I quickly teleported away from. "You think a mere mortal can defeat me?" she snarled at seeing my escape after she had received a bigger wound while I was by all accounts unharmed. "I am Stheno, the mighty." "Good for you," I replied back as my shadowy tendrils writhed, seeking as if they seemed to be enjoying the fight. Stheno's aura pulsed, a crimson fire that threatened to consume everything in its path. I focused, channeling my will through every dark tendril I could manifest at once. Stheno charged again, her claws slashing, wildly as if with no clear plan in mind. I sidestepped, then quickly ensnared her with my tendrils at important joints and drove my spear upward, since I knew that probably wouldn't keep her locked down for long. The blade pierced through her neck, and came out of the other side from the top of her cranium. Stheno's eyes widened in shock. Her aura flickered, then dissipated. She crumbled to the ground, before even saying a single word, her dust mixing with the stone floor. I stood there, breathing heavily, since teleporting was a costly power, especially if I used it so often. The battle was over. Stheno and Uriel had been defeated. I looked back upon the floor now with two heads with snakes for hair, one almost twice as big as the other, the spoils from my battle. I quickly picked them up and threw them into my shadow, since after all they still did have the power of petrification, something that would be especially useful against beings who didn't overpower them in divinity or power. Well, that is two down, only the queen left. I couldn't help but say relieved, since this quest didn't seem to be as long as the last two I had done. Once more grabbing my compass from my shadow, I thought of Medusa and let the wonderful little artifact guide me on my quest. Greek myth fact: today's fact is about the birth and early life of Chiron, since I had to say it like 4 times to different readers XD. Chiron was son of the Titan Kronos and the Oceanid Philyra. Kronos transformed himself into a stallion after laying with Philyra to narrowly avoid being caught by his wife Rhea. After falling pregnant, Philyra gave birth to Chiron alone, but in most myths she was so horrified by her offspring she begged the gods for an escape plan. They thereby transformed her into a linden tree, leaving Chiron alone on Mount Pelion in Thessaly. Abandoned by both his parents, Chiron was eventually found by Apollo, who took Chiron under his wing and teaching him a range of skills including medicine, music, prophecy, poetry, and law. Under Apollo's wing, Chiron developed into a peaceful and intelligent centaur who excelled in every discipline. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 46, Medusa, beginning the 6th. 2 months later. Leeds Point, New Jersey, June 29, 2003. I once again stood before the place where the monster I needed to slay was hiding, a garden statuary shop with the words Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium, and if that wasn't a big enough giveaway, the giant stone structures of monsters and humans at the entrance were there to make sure anyone would know this was the place where Medusa the queen resided. Soon a woman with more mist surrounding her than even the Pygmaoi tribe came out to receive me. She was wearing a black gown, a normal-looking body, and a veil that covered her face, a small smile on her face that would probably fool most demigods, but she had one thing that betrayed an intense red aura bigger than even her sisters. "You know you can take your veil off, I am blind," I couldn't help but say as I looked more at the mist of a monster. "Oh no, I wouldn't want to scare you with my features," she said in a soothing voice that even commanded the mist as it reached my ears. "Charms speak," I couldn't help but mutter as I saw how her voice changed the mist in the same way some Aphrodite kids were able to do so. "You are very knowledgeable, young demigod. How would you like to come in for some food? I am guessing you are famished after such a long travel," Medusa said, still hidden behind the layer of mist. "I don't eat with people who disguise themselves," I replied back as I snapped my fingers, dissipating the mist around her, which transformed her dainty human form into what she actually looked like, or at least was cursed to look like. 2 huge bat wings, boar tusks instead of fangs, scaly skin, long claws just like her sisters. The only thing that remained hidden was her snake hair, since the hat veil was real. "Much better, but if you wanna eat and talk, how about you also take off your hat?" I couldn't help but say, almost patting myself at the back at the good job I had done at removing the mist that had been clinging to her. "Well, if you would like that, I shall do as you ask. After all, to have company you must fulfill their request, right?" Medusa replied to me as she slowly took off her veil, with hundreds of small snakes suddenly slithering out and about while hissing at me. "Now isn't that much better? We can speak to each other truly face to snake now," I added, a smile gracing my face once more. "Well, women first," I continued as we both walked into the building where I knew it would spell her doom, but why not grab a good homemade meal on the way? It seemed she had been waiting for my arrival as we slowly entered a dining room which was already filled with food, ranging from turkey, to salads, to salmon. We seated ourselves each at one side at the table in silence while she continued looking at me with a smile as if she were still trying to turn me to stone. I decided to start the conversation. "So how exactly did your story go? I mean, there are like 4 different iterations of it," I started saying. "My story?" Medusa said, puzzled at my question. "Yeah, I mean your sister's story is kind of like a one and done deal, but you have a ton of different ones, like in some you were born this way like your sisters, in others you were cursed by Athena after either sleeping with Poseidon or him or *ping you, so yeah, I am interested to know which is the right one," I finished explaining. "My story? I was a priestess who gave everything I had for Athena, but then a dashing man came and told me tales of wonder and he enchanted me, so yes, I slept with him," Medusa finished. "Okay, then I got your anger towards Athena, but why not towards Poseidon? He just left you there after being cursed and you losing your beauty," I continued as I munched on some salmon. "Why don't I hate Poseidon? Maybe because I loved him." Medusa continued our conversation, which she honestly seemed to be focused each second more in. "I mean, I hate Poseidon cause you know he tried to drown me, so don't worry, we are between haters of certain gods here. You can tell me if you hate Poseidon, the lover who left you to be cursed for all eternity," I added, trying once more, now munching on some turkey. "No. He loved me," Medusa yelled, standing up from the table, her snake hair hissing at me. "Hey, no need to get so defensive at me, I am just saying he is a god, and after Big Z up there Poseidon is pretty much the horniest one." I laughed at myself. "I have been trying to treat you as a guest in my home," Medusa started saying, "to kill me," I interjected in the middle of her sentence, as suddenly, without even a second to respond, 9 shadowy tendrils gathered from the corners of the room, shooting at her, ensnaring her wings, arms, legs and neck. "I think we both knew where this was going. After all, I killed your sisters, but it is good that you aren't as battle-hungry as the other 2, I said as I wiped my mouth with a napkin. "Still, I don't understand how you were more feared than both of your other sisters. Uriel seemed the fastest and Stheno was the strongest. Is it just because you are my famous? If so, Uriel really had the short end of the stick when it came to pseudonyms," I finished saying while Medusa continued wriggling, trying to escape my tendrils as her snake hair hissed at me. "Maybe it is because your petrification site is stronger. Well, either way it doesn't matter." Standing up from my seat, I edged myself closer to her, summoned my spear into my hand and decapitated her, her head rolling on the ground as she turned to dust with one final scream. I grabbed her head by the snakes, which were also dead weirdly enough, and threw it into my shadow. Now I have 3 heads, but nothing to use on them. These are sad times we live in. As soon as I placed the head in my shadow, the familiar cracking sound of a shackle being broken reverberated across my body just like it had each time before, and after the feeling of the broken shackle, drowsiness started spreading through my body, as I tumbled over, falling asleep on the spot. Odysseus Dreamscape, time unknown. Hello again, dear father. I said once more at seeing I had been brought to the same place as always, millions of eyes, infinite space, you know the drill. Hi, Odysseus, you have done well on your last labor. My father sighed, his voice spanning through the entirety of the space. Thanks, now what else do I have to do? Come on, I want to get stronger. I said impatiently towards my godly parent. He sighed as he said, for your 6th labor you must defeat the Amazons and the Salimwa tribe. Based on deeds of Bellerophon. As for your hint, it is in their names. I nodded at his words, allowing myself to sink through the floor and the space shattering around me as I left my dreamscape. Greek myth fact. Today's fact will obviously be about Medusa, but probably obscured details about Gorgons that you guys didn't know. If you did know them, good job, thumbs up sign. One cool fact about Gorgons is that on the left side of their body their blood is incredibly poisonous, and on the right side their blood is capable of healing almost anything. Medusa also has 2 sons with Poseidon who are born from her beheading by Perseus. One is Pegasus, who was later either tamed or given to Bellerophon, a son of Poseidon, and the other was Chrysaor, a young man whose name means he who bears a golden sword. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 47, Amazon Protesters, Weird Girl. 1 week later. Amazon Rainforest, Brazil, July 8, 2003. You can't go in. The Amazon isn't a place for you to cut down. Come on, move out of the way, we need to start our jobs. The different yelling of protesters which blocked the path of different construction vehicles and people. I didn't want to get caught up in all the mess, so I encircled myself with the mist, becoming invisible to all mortals, or at least it should have. As I was about to enter the forest, a small girl, who looked about 9, with an intense orange aura around her, yelled at me, "You can't go in, can't you see all the barricades?" Was the only thing that came out of my mouth at seeing that I had been caught, something which I deemed impossible since I was disguised with enough mist for even weak demigods to not be able to perceive me. "You didn't see anything, this is all a dream," I decided to say as I encircled myself with even more mist, hoping to become invisible to the little girl. "What do you mean this is all a dream? I am wide awake," she replied as she came even closer to me with a confident stride. "Alright, this is weird," I couldn't help but think as I jumped down from the gates I was climbing, which seemed to have been put up by the protesters. Thump. I arrived before the girl and asked, "Who are you?" "Well, that is a little rude. If you want my name you should at least introduce yourself." The girl replied back, snarking. "I am Odysseus, now who are you?" I questioned once more. "I am Rachel, Rachel Elizabeth Dare." The girl, "No," Rachel replied. As I started thinking of possible reasons why she would be able to see me, I could only come to one conclusion: she was a daughter of a god, and a powerful one at that. "Alright, this is going to sound weird, but have strange things happened to you, or you don't have a parent?" I asked Rachel. She looked at me with a weird look, and replied, "No, the only weird thing is seeing you come out of nowhere and you trying to jump the gate, with no one else noticing. As for parents, I have 2. "And where exactly are these parents?" I questioned. "They are here in Brazil. And they just let their daughter come to a protesters' rally," I added. "Hey, the deforestation of the Amazons is a big problem," she said. "I am not saying it isn't, it is just a little weird for a young girl to be here by herself," I couldn't help but say. "You are a kid too, where are your parents?" She added once more with a fierce look on her face. "Don't worry about that," I replied, as I was about to just teleport into the rainforest as far as my sight could let me. I couldn't help but add something more because she didn't seem to be a demigod, but at the same time she did, and I wouldn't want something bad to happen to a person who could be my cousin. "You should probably go to Montauk, at the end of Long Island, and if you ever see other weird things or kids, tell them you know Odysseus." Finishing my words, she was about to say something, but I just sunk into my own shadow. Rachel Elizabeth Dare POV. What the hell? I couldn't help but yell as suddenly a few of the protesters turned to look at me, something I realized hadn't happened since I begun my conversation with the blind kid Odysseus. "Montauk, at the end of Long Island, hey," I whispered to myself, ingraining those words into my memory. Camp Half-Blood, July 8, 2003. Luke Castellan POV. Faster, faster, faster. I couldn't help but mutter as I kept swinging my sword, the blade and air creating noticeable friction because of my speed, but it still wasn't enough. Faster, Luke, faster. I pushed myself further like I always did to my absolute limit, but suddenly a drowsy feeling started creeping through me, and I fell forwards unconscious. Luke's dreamscape, unknown time. Son of Hermes. A chilling voice echoed. As I looked forward I saw who the voice belonged to, a 9-meter-tall male body, with piercing golden eyes, unruly black hair that reached his shoulders and a long pointed beard. I have brought you here for one simple reason, to empower you. The voice continued, the tone itself putting pressure on my body, or mind in this case. Who are you? I couldn't help but ask. I am Kronos, son of Uranus and Gaia, king of the Titans. Kronos replied. My eyes widened as much as they could at the sudden reveal. Kronos then began to speak again. You are talented more so than even the gods can see, but like always they just use you demigods for the sole reason of their enjoyment. Join me, Luke, we can create a world where pain no longer exists and the gods no longer rule. We can go back to the Golden Age. Can you make me stronger? I questioned the Titan. I can. He replied. Then I will join you. Let's create a world for Titans and demigods, where we can all be free. I added. The Titan let out a devilish smile and stretched his hand out. Agree to become my vessel, shake my hand and our pact shall be complete. I stretched my own hand to meet his, being dwarfed by its sheer size, and then I shook it, an unknown devilish smile even appearing on my face. Greek myth fact. Today's fact will be about Kronos since it is his first appearance XD. Kronos, was the king of the Titans and the god of time, in particular time when viewed as a destructive, all-devouring force. He ruled the cosmos during the Golden Age after castrating and deposing his father Uranus. In fear of a prophecy that he would in turn be overthrown by his own son, Kronos swallowed each of his children as they were born. Rhea managed to save the youngest, Zeus, by hiding him away on the island of Crete, and fed Kronos a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. The god grew up, forced Kronos to disgorge his swallowed offspring, and led the Olympians in a 10-year war against the Titans, driving them in defeat into the pit of Tartarus. Many human generations later, Zeus released Kronos and his brothers from their prison, and made the old Titan king of the Elysian Islands, home of the blessed dead. Author note, I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 48, Amazon Rainforest, Where Dangers Lurk. Amazon Rainforest, July 12, 2003. The forest was a blur around me as I sprinted, the noise of destruction growing louder with each step. Trees fell like dominoes, their trunks splintering and crashing to the ground, mimicking the sounds of a distant earthquake. Every shadow seemed to hide another menace, another creature from some twisted nightmare. Just as I prepared to make a sharp left turn, a monstrous creature lunged from the undergrowth. Its gaping maw, lined with 2 enormous fangs dripping with venom, aimed to swallow me whole. In a split second, I teleported a few meters ahead, narrowly evading its deadly embrace. This is insane! I shouted, my breath ragged as I pushed myself harder. Monkey dwarves, giant snakes, oversized spiders, and now crabs? Why are there crabs in a rainforest? My rant was interrupted by a sudden assault from above. A pile of foul-smelling shit splattered beside me, hurled by one of the mischievous drawer-like monkeys in the treetops. I dodged just in time, but the brief distraction cost me a few precious seconds. 2 massive crabs, their pincers gleaming menacingly, closed in on me. Their powerful claws were capable of slicing through the giant trees that stood in their path. With a quick summoning gesture, I conjured 2 tendrils from the shadows. Each tendril was lined with barbs, their tips sharpened to deadly points, a new technique I'd been creating for the past few days. The tendrils shot forward, wrapping around the crab's massive claws. Though their thick exoskeletons shielded them from the worst of the barbs, I had bought myself a precious moment to put some distance between us. As I continued to run, the ground shaking beneath the crab's pursuit, I felt a sting on my arm, a shallow cut from one of the crab's pincers. Blood trickled down my arm. I subconsciously used my own shadow, turning it into fine threads and stitching the wound shut. I pushed on, my muscles burning with fatigue, my lungs gasping for air, after the continuous assault of never-ending monsters over the past 4 days, without sleep, without rest. The forest seemed endless, the monsters relentless. Just when I thought I couldn't run any further, a deafening roar echoed through the trees. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw a giant snake, its scales glinting in the dappled sunlight, slithering after me with incredible speed. The snake's fangs dripped with venom, its eyes locked onto me with a predatory focus. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled speed, I dodged between two massive trees, narrowly avoiding the snake's lunging strike. But my relief was short-lived as I stumbled into a clearing, surrounded by a horde of monkey dwarves, their eyes gleaming with malevolent glee. Trapped and outnumbered, I summoned all my remaining strength for one final stand. The monkey dwarves advanced, their claws and fangs bared, their chittering laughter filling the air. Just as they closed in, ready to strike, a sudden snap echoed through the clearing. In an instant, all the monsters froze, snakes, crabs, monkeys, and spiders, their bodies trembling as if caught in a powerful force. Then, one by one, they exploded into clouds of dark dust, dissipating into the air. The clearing fell silent, save for the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. A dark silhouette emerged from the shadows, a figure cloaked in an aura of black energy. Her presence was suffocating, her eyes cold and emotionless. "Hello, half-brother!" her feminine, raspy voice proclaimed. "Who are you?" I questioned to the monster gripping my spear ready for another battle. The being's laughter echoed throughout the woods. "Ha ha ha, I am Achilles' half-brother. It seems you were in a bit of trouble." As soon as I heard her name, Achilles, I couldn't help but see the similar features which was normally associated with her. An old hag with bleeding cheeks, tear-stained eyes, overgrown fingernails, and dusty hair that seemed to absorb the light around her, it was indeed the daemon of misery, Achilles. "Running from your fears, half-brother," she hissed, her voice dripping with a joyful and malice-filled tone, the dichotomy grasping my ears. I tried to muster a response, but my voice laid caught in my throat. Exhausted after the lack of sleep and continuous fighting with the monsters inside this forest, I could only stare at her in fierce silence. Achilles stepped closer, her black aura intensifying. "What's wrong, brother? Frog stuck in your throat?" I continued staring at her as she slowly kept on approaching. I felt the shadows and darkness surrounding us, and with a thought I sent dozens of spear-shaped tendrils at her as fast as I could. The tendrils approached her elderly form, and just as I thought it could work, a wicked smile appeared on her face. The tendrils soon stopped an inch in front of her and they started to decay. "Wait, what?" I gasped at seeing that she could decay something ethereal like shadows and darkness. "Oh come on, brother, you shouldn't attack family, especially when they just saved your ass," she replied, hissing. "I would have been fine," I said between gasped breaths. "Well, it certainly didn't look like that." She smiled at me once more. "Still, if you wish to prove your mettle, I have another project that doesn't involve monsters," she said sinisterly, then as if the night itself had blackened, a domain of darkness enclosed it in milliseconds. I tried controlling the darkness as it surrounded me, but I just felt my will slipping of the darkness as if they wouldn't respond to me, something which had never happened, and for the first time in a long while I felt fear gripping my very soul. "Let's test your fears and feed on your misery." And with those chilling words, the world around me darkened, swallowed by Achilles' overwhelming presence. Greek mythos fact: today's fact will be about the daemon of misery, Achilles. Achilles was the personified spirit, daimona, of the death mist, the clouding of the eyes preceding death. She may also have been the goddess of deadly poisons. Achilles was probably numbered amongst the Kyrs. Probably a daughter of Nyx, though nowhere stated. Achilles, according to some ancient cosmogonies, the eternal night, and the first created being which existed even before chaos. According to Hesiod, she was the personification of misery and sadness, and as such she was represented on the shield of Heracles, pale, emaciated, and weeping, with chattering teeth, swollen knees, long nails on her fingers, bloody cheeks, and her shoulders thickly covered with dust. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 49, Chapter 49, Trials of Misery. Unknown place, unknown time. I sluggishly opened my eyes, something I normally wasn't obligated to do because of my blindness and my dark sight, which worked even in my sleep, but somehow someway my vision power had been taken away from me and I was back to being completely blind when I shut my eyes. As soon as I opened my eyes, a gasp escaped my mouth as I saw I could see, like actually see, colors and all, yet what I had first laid my eyes upon wasn't something I would have wanted to be my first time actually seeing. The brown ground shifted and moved like waves. I looked around me, and before I could gather my thoughts, a dozen earth-made spikes shot from the ground and pierced me at different intervals, my blood splattering onto the spikes and ground, slowly I lost consciousness and only a singular thought escaped my mind: so this is how I die. My eyes opened once more, a splitting headache appearing in my head. Wait, what? I questioned to myself as I saw myself once more in the same shanking ground. The ground shook, and from it emerged creatures of soil and stone, their maws gaping, their eyes hollow pits of darkness. I saw them approach and thought of summoning my spear, but it didn't work. I thought of darkness and shadows, yet I also couldn't feel them. As I was about to start just throwing hands instead of what I usually did, the monsters descended upon me, tearing flesh from bone. I felt each bite, each earth-made tooth sinking into my tendons, my very cells screaming in agony. The monsters feasted upon me as I once again succumbed to the void. Yet, death was not the end. I was reborn, again and again, each time meeting a new, gruesome fate. The ground liquefied as if it were quicksand. I tried fighting the pull of the earth, as I put in more effort the earth itself pressured my legs and I could feel as they burst the quicksand stained blood red, but soon the blood also sank. I was up to my neck in the liquefied earth, and moments after the earth flowed into my throat, clogging it. I coughed what little earth I could and swallowed the rest, feeling the minerals on every taste bud. I closed my mouth soon after, but the earth just flowed into my nostrils. It suffocated me more and more. The earth entered my ears and all I could hear was the rustling of the earth as I slowly drowned in it. As more and more earth flowed into my nostrils and suffocated me, my body instinctively opened its mouth trying to gasp for air, but that just led into more earth entering my already dying body. The cycle was relentless. Each death was followed by a return to this hellish landscape. The ground beneath me split open, revealing a gaping chasm. I tried to leap to safety, but I was too slow. The jagged edges of the chasm tore into me, ripping me apart as I fell, feeling every excruciating moment until I hit the bottom, feeling as my skull cracked in the first millisecond and my head burst, drowning the chasm in blood and brain remains. Still as always I found myself back in the same place I was in before, the same moving ground. As a dull sigh escaped my lips. Without warning, walls of dirt rose around me, closing and breaking my bones, chest cavity, my capillaries and veins exploding under the pressure. The walls continued on closing until I was nothing but a smear on their implacable surface. I was eaten, crushed, drowned, each death worse, slower, and more excruciating than the last, and each time I thought it was over, I was forced to endure it all over again. But as the cycle continued, a numbness spread through my mind. The slight amount of tears that had first escaped my tear ducts soon dried up as I no longer felt even the worst of tortures and deaths. The terror of death gave way to a dull acceptance. I no longer fought against the inevitable. Only one thought continued growing through my mind, almost as if robotically repeating itself: I wonder when this is gonna end. Achilles, demon of misery POV. I rested my knees, sitting in front of my half-brother, my newest prey, as I grabbed one of his tears with my nail and drank it. Delicious. I couldn't help but exclaim, truly misery from a demi-primordial was exquisite. But little by little I felt how the boy's misery kept on decreasing at an exponential rate, and soon I couldn't feast on any more of the boy's misery. Well, that was short-lived, but still it was worth it even though it was short. I guess we should move on to the second trial now. This is where the real fun begins. Time to taste the boy's true misery. I said to myself as my face became ecstatic at the thought of his misery. I started manipulating the mist around us so much so that the normally invisible mist formed a layer around us. I then manipulated the mist into the boy's orifices, from his pores, nostrils, ears, any place the mist could get into it did. I then directed the mist towards the boy's brain, and then the fun began. Odysseus POV. I had just been killed by a swarm of earth-like bugs that had eaten me from the inside out as I suffocated on the sheer amount of them, as suddenly I regained consciousness and found myself in a very familiar place, Camp Half-Blood. What the hell is going on now? I thought to myself when a very familiar voice reached my ears. Hey Ozzy, what are you doing just standing there? I turned around and 3 tears escaped my eyes as I saw who was in front of me. Thalia, her black short hair, blue electric-like eyes that seemed to hold untold power, and her clothes fitting her punk style, which she usually, but there was something different about her. She looked to be around 14 years old, the age she should have been if she hadn't turned into a tree. Why are you crying? Thalia approached me, a considerate look on her face, her fingers gracing my face as she wiped away my tears. I remained silent as I almost instinctively hugged her. No reason, just happy to see you. I whispered into her ear, my tears still falling at the same pace. Oh Ozzy, what are you doing? She asked nervously. Just let me stay like this a little longer. I whispered back. Okay Ozzy. She muttered as she embraced me as well. Greek mythos fact: the younger Cyclops were a tribe of primitive, one-eyed giants who dwelt in caves and herded flocks of sheep on the island of Hyperia, which was later identified by the Greeks with Sicily. The Hyperion Cyclops were closely related to the Gigantes and Phaeacians, both of which were born from the blood of the castrated Aranos spilt upon the earth. The first of these giants, in both strength and stature, was Polyphemus. Unlike the rest of the tribe, he was a son of the god Poseidon. The three elder Cyclopes were a different breed altogether. These ancient beings fought with Zeus in the Titan War and forged the weapons of the gods. Nevertheless, they were also sometimes located on the island of Sicily. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots/characters. Chapter 50, Second Trial of Misery. Misery Dream, Unknown Time. Ozzy, could you please stop looking at me like that? Thalia, or at least something that looked and acted eerily similar to Thalia, said. Hey, oh yeah, sorry. I muttered, still in a daze, as I looked deep into her electric blue eyes, something I had never seen before. They were mesmerizing to say the least. We should get going to next class. I know you don't like Pegasus riding, but it is something we need to do. Come on, Luke and Annabeth are already waiting for us. She said with a white smile that struck my heart and made me enter a daze once more. I never thought being able to actually see her would be this amazing. Yeah, let's go, I added as Thalia grabbed my hand where my tattoo was imprinted, and I once more was shocked, since I could once more feel my connection to both my spear and the shadows surrounding us. As we ran across camp hand in hand, her warmth producing a giddy feeling in my gut, something I had never experienced even when some Aphrodite kids tried using charm speak on me. At this moment I was the happiest I had ever been, being able to see all the campers and cabins, colors and all, for the first time, and I was starting to hope this would never end. I wasn't thinking of finishing my quest, escaping this place, or even about Achilles, who was probably the one who had sent me here. Soon we both arrived at the Pegasus stables, although most of them were out in the fields grazing, and in the fields were a group of kids, which I quickly recognized, though I didn't know how, as the unclaimed Hermes and Athena kids. Luke, Annabeth. Thalia yelled beside me, her hand still clamped around mine as she signaled at the two demigods with her other hand. Two figures came running at us. They looked like brother and sister. Both of them had blonde hair, while the boy had blue-colored eyes and the small girl had grayish eyes. Something taut swiped their lineage to their godly parent. Yet as I looked at them, a raging fury edged deep within me was threatening to spill out, because even as I felt Thalia's hand around mine, I was once more reminded of her fate, and how it had been these two's fault. Still, as I turned to my side and saw Thalia's smile complemented by her black punk-styled hair, I instinctively calmed myself. Hey Thalia, Ozzy! Annabeth yelled, rushing to us and hugging Thalia's waist, something which seemed weird after all. From her looks she seemed to be around 9 years old, probably the age she would actually be right now. Hey dude! Luke said to me, but as I stared into his eyes, I could only muster up a hey of my own. Soon after we started the CLAS and I mounted the same Pegasus I always used to ride back in camp, since it seemed even in this place the other Pegasus were afraid of me. As we were about to take flight, I suddenly remembered something which I hadn't realized until now. Thalia was afraid of heights. She never got on a Pegasus, and it seemed to even hold true now, as while she was on the Pegasus she never allowed it to get bigger than a few feet of the ground. Soon the class ended and we let the Pegasus run and fly across the fields freely once more, something which Thalia's Pegasus was obviously waiting for, since as soon as the daughter of the Lord of the Skies climbed off its back it took flight higher into the air than I even thought was possible for Pegasus. Seriously, I will never understand why we have to ride these. There aren't even enough Pegasus for every camper. Let us choose Chiron. Thalia grumbled to herself. Well, that was probably what she was intending, but her thunderous voice never let her truly just talk to herself. Don't worry Thalia, I am sure you will one day conquer your fear of heights, I said as I placed my hand on her shoulder. Nuh-uh, never, she replied while shaking her head. After the first class, life soon became a blur of happiness. Years passed by as Thalia, Luke, Annabeth, and I continued growing, though I always felt my resentment towards the latter two no matter how much time passed. One day, though our monotonous life changed as my powers grew, I was soon able to see everything shadows around me could see. One of them however caught a weird scene. It was a satyr, a middle-aged woman and a black-haired boy with sea-green eyes running from something in the woods, and they seemed to be going straight towards camp. I honestly wondered if something similar had happened to my mother, since after all the camp guards did find me in the middle of the first, so it was definitely plausible. I sunk into my shadow, teleporting before the trip, 2 words escaping my mouth, Sup Grover. Yet I recognized where I had seen the satyr before. His aura looked identical to that of Grover, someone who I also blamed for Thalia's death, though I had never seen the young satyr before at camp, so it wasn't as if I could do anything to him. though not like I wanted to, not in this place at least. Odysseus, thank the gods, something is following us. Grover said in pants, yeah I can tell. I said sarcastically. Where's the trio as my shadows caught onto what monster had been chasing the bunch. You wouldn't believe it, the thing was a minotaur of all things. Stay behind me kid, young lady. I said towards the two people accompanying the satyr one. Probably the boy I could guess was the demigod A.K.A the reason for the monster. They quickly followed my words and ran behind me, just at the exact moment the minotaur burst through the trees, in full charge towards me. I looked at the half-bull, half-human with a deadpan look as it continued rushing towards me. "Rt you gonna do anything?" the boy yelled behind me. Heck, what a scaredy cat! I thought to myself, and just as the minotaur was a few feet from me, tens of shadowy tendrils with barbs, my now default tendrils, wrapped around its body, stopping it in its tracks. I shot another small shadowy tendril which I had made as shape as possible from my index finger. The shadow-made weapons entered the minotaur's head and shot out of its nape. As the minotaur started turning into golden dust, I turned to the trio. Their jaws dropped as they looked at me with almost the same terror as they had looked at the minotaur. Their faces and my dad's, Chiron, indoctrination led me to saying the sentence we always said to new campers: welcome to Camp Half-Blood, you're home away from home. Author note, this sorry for not posting, have final exams going on right now, so don't expect a lot of stable updating at least until June. Here we will have a festival with how many chapters I will be uploading, lol. Welp, either way, if you want to support me, join my Patreon at Joanjudo Stories, where you will have access to secondary novels, and probably a build-up of the next chapters. Also, I just made a Discord for anyone who wants to talk or has any questions. https://discord.gg/murftgaz*. Chapter 51, Second Trial of Misery, 2. Misery Dream, Unknown Time. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood, your home away from home. I said, a small grin on my face, tilting myself forward to look closer at the boy who had caused this commotion. He had black wild hair similar to mine, except it smelled more like seawater than I was expecting. Then there were his eyes, sea green, the thing that most demigods gained from their parents, the thing that proved your godly lineage. There weren't many demigods who had green eyes, though there were three primary gods this kid could be a child to: Aphrodite, since her kids always had different eye and hair colors; then there was Demeter, all her children had green eyes but they were normally a lighter color; and finally Poseidon, though they were banned from being conceived, still Thalia was an example, it could still happen. Thank you for saving us, Odysseus, Grover said shyly as he walked closer to both me and the demigod. Don't worry about it, I replied, shaking my hand, but my eyes still focused on the boy. After all, it was always fun to try and figure out which god or goddess they belonged to. Hummus, could you stop staring at me? The kid asked me, his face slightly flushed from nervousness. After all, the kid had almost died to a minotaur, not exactly the best way to go out of there were any. Without saying anything but complying to his request, I turned over to look at the woman. Thank you for caring, take care of your son. The ones up there usually don't, so you have my gratitude, but you should probably leave soon. Demigod scent doesn't exactly vanish quickly. The woman nodded at my words and turned to look at her son, placing her hands on his shoulders. Percy, follow Grover to camp, we will see each other again. But, Mom, the boy who had now been identified as Percy said, but before he could finish his sentence. Percy, no buts, this is what is best for you right now. You may not think so, but it's the truth, the woman said. Welp, that's that we should get going, after all mortals can't enter camp, so bye, bye. I yelled behind to the lady as I pushed both Percy and Grover forward. It seemed there were no complaints, since as I pushed the younglings, I am 14, they just waved goodbye to the woman. Soon we reached camp and I could see the amazement in the demigod's eyes as I told Grover to go to Cloven Council. After all, bringing back a demigod alive was a feat in and of itself. As Percy and I walked through camp, he suddenly asked me, "Hey, why is there lava coming out of that mountain?" "Well, for the extra challenge, of course," I replied, throwing a smile to the young demigod. Yet before we could continue the camp tour, something I had grown to enjoy with the random demigods that came from time to time to camp in this whatever it was, clopping sounds started coming in front of us, and in a wave of sound, a four-legged horse with the top of half a human galloped or rode, I honestly didn't know, in front of us. Odysseus, I will take the boy from here. I looked at my dad, then at Percy, then back at my dad, then back at Percy. After all, I was the one who normally showed the demigods everything in camp, since I would probably be an instructor here when I'm older. After all, it wasn't like I had an actual education, even if I knew more than most mortals. If you say so, I said as I shrugged my shoulders and left Percy with my dad, while sending a shadow from which I could look through into Percy's own shadow, making it grow slightly larger. 6 months later. 6 months had passed, since Percy's appearance at camp. Turns out you cowls didn't believe it, he was a son of Poseidon. The dude was overpowered to say the least. He had been here on and off for 6 months, and he was giving me trouble when it came to pure swordsmanship, a hobby I had taken when I appeared in this place. Still, now wasn't the time to think about Percy, but rather thank the stars of having the ability to see in this place, as right now I was on the roof of the big house, with a rather thunderous girl at my side. Still can't believe you came up here without getting frightened, I said, laughing out loud. Seeing her rather scared expression, she looked like she was about to have a heart attack. Well, you called me here, I couldn't exactly leave you hanging now, could I? We stopped speaking, silence not echoing around us. It's a nice night, hey, I said, trailing off looking at the stars above us. Thalia stayed silent for a few seconds before answering, yeah, this is nice. Without either of us noticing, our hands stretched out to meet each other's, feeling the contact through our skin. We looked at each other and are holding hands, my face burning up and she started looking like a red pepper. Still we didn't let go of each other's hand and stayed in silence looking at the stars, keeping track of the time through Polaris and Ursa Major. Ursa Major's first star positioned perfectly above Polaris, signaling the start of a new day, the 1st of January, Thalia's birthday. So, not wanting to destroy the peaceful ambience that had shaped between us, I pressed my hand slightly above hers, which she returned in kind. I didn't know how, but I knew my message had gotten to her, the message of course being happy 16th birthday. Still, I was a demigod, and even in this place that seemed almost too perfect to be true, chaos and death followed me and every other demigod in this place for that matter. A noise similar to a shatter resounded across camp. The camp border had been destroyed. That couldn't happen. The destroyed barrier which separated us from the mortal world and the perpetrators of the barrier being broken, 12 huge beings with different features, every single one towering over the trees, evil, world-ending grins on their faces. Time to feast, brothers and sisters. The smallest one, wielding a scythe, yelled, his voice commanding power. Ozzy, that's... Thalia's voice trailed off, cut by my own. Kronos and the other titans. I said, fear gripping me as I looked upon the beings that once ruled over the cosmos. I had faced a similar wing as before to them in power, Alcyoneus surviving I didn't even remember how. Thalia, try to gather the campers, and get them out of camp. We are unprepared, we can't fight here nor now. She only nodded in reply, her sense of fear of heights disappearing as she jumped off the roof, a few meters above ground. Greek myth fact, Titan, in Greek mythology, any of the children of Uranus and Gaia and their descendants. According to Hesiod's Theogony, there were 12 original Titans, the brothers Oceanus, Khaos, Crius, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Kronos, and the sisters Thea, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Tethys. At the instigation of Gaia, the Titans rebelled against their father, who had shut them up in Tartarus. Under the leadership of Kronos they deposed Uranus and set up Kronos as their ruler. But one of Kronos' sons, Zeus, rebelled against his father, and a struggle then ensued between them in which most of the Titans sided with Kronos. Zeus and his brothers and sisters finally defeated the Titans after 10 years of fierce battles, the Titanomachia. The Titans were then hurled down by Zeus and imprisoned in a cavity beneath Tartarus. Author note: I started a Patreon called Joan Judo Stories. It will end up having 10 or 20 chapters in advance, access to the secondary fanfic, will write in spare time, and polls to decide some of the future plots /characters. https://discord.gg/j2n4c5v7. Chapter 52, Second Trial of Misery, 3. Soundtrack, Footsteps of Doom. Most attack on Titan. Misery dream, unknown time. Sinking into my shadow, I appeared before one of the Titans, summoning my spear and ordering the shadows to enter my body, strengthening me, empowering me beyond what any other demigod was capable. Standing before the row of 11 Titans that eclipsed my very being, knowing that I had to stop them from getting into camp. Demigods are truly puny, don't you think so, Thalia? One of the bugger Titans said as he laughed, looking down on me both literally and figuratively. I didn't reply back, simply summoning my hooked tendrils, dozens escaping from the surrounding shadows, trying to ensnare the Titan who had just laughed. My tendrils were inches away from ensnaring the Titan, yet in a moment they were all burnt to ashes, a now flaming sword in the Titan's grasp. Puny traitor, don't you know attacking mid-conversation is rude? Hyperion, just kill him already. One of the Titanesses said, her silver hair and eyes drawing my attention if it weren't because of the enormous spear in her left hand. Hyperion seemed to adhere to her command, performing a downward slash, the heat around us intensifying, but I sank into my shadow once more, instantly teleporting behind them. I needed to stop their advance for as long as possible so that people could escape through Pegasus or any other means. Seeing my form reshape a few meters from them, Hyperion laughed once more. Ha 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 ha, brothers, sisters, you can keep going to the traitors' camps, I will keep this demigod company for a while longer. The others didn't reply back and simply kept on walking towards camp like an unstoppable force of nature. I couldn't exactly let 10 titans walk unhindered to camp, so drawing as much strength as possible from the surrounding darkness and shadows, I did a move I had been practicing lately. Putting the spear in front of me, clasping it with both hands, Hyperion simply looking at what I was doing with interest, probably unfettered by the actions of a one demigod. A low, almost unhearable mutter escaped my lips. Dome of shadows. The shadows from trees, myself and even the titans heard my call, no, my order. They started encircling all 12 of us, a dome beginning to rise from the shadowy perimeter, encapsulating us in mere seconds. Sorry, but as unwanted guests it is my job to kick you out, I said towards the 11 titans, heaving in small breaths as using the dome was difficult in it and of itself. The titans stayed silent, simply looking down on me before a blonde-haired black-eyed titaness materialized, a silver bow and a golden arrow in her hands, shooting it at me, which I dodged once more by sinking into the shadows. The air crackled with the power of the titans, their footsteps thundering like the drums of doom. I stood, my back against the shadowy dome, the only thing keeping them from reaching camp and allowing the campers to evacuate in times. The titans, colossal and indifferent, marched forward, their eyes set on the destruction of the camp behind me. Is that all you have, little demigod? Hyperion's voice boomed, his flaming sword casting a hellish glow over the battlefield. I could feel the heat licking at my skin, the desperation clawing at my throat. I was alone, outnumbered, outmatched. With every ounce of strength left in me, I called upon the shadows once more, feeling them surge through my veins like dark, forbidden adrenaline. This is not the end, I whispered to myself, more a plea than a statement. A titaness with silver hair and eyes that mirrored the moon's glow took a step forward, her spear poised to strike. You fight in vain, she hissed, her voice a melody of malice. I dodged, barely, the tip of her spear grazing my clothes and skin, which I stitched up quickly with my black threads. Enough of this charade. The smallest of the titans wielding a scythe said before disappearing from my view and reappearing once more in front of me, slashing with his scythe like a sickle collecting wheat. Summoning shadows from whichever place I could, I formed a wall at my side, stopping for a few moments the scythe and allowing me to teleport once more. Sorry. Ha, but as long as, I'm here no one is. Ha, getting past this border. Are you so sure about that, demigod? Because it seems your shadows are beginning to fail you. Then I noticed my teleportation was causing me to lose control of the shadows making the dome. I had to either let down the dome or stop teleporting to keep it up. Don't like either of those, so let's make a third. I murmured, drawing even more shadows into my body, before exploding forward with unexpected strength. Rushing towards the nearest titan, who was at least 10 meters tall, I lunged forward with my spear piercing into its ankle. Aig, you insist you actually touched me. The red-haired, green-eyed titan yelled, not in pain but in fury. Hitting his ankle with his other foot, he sent my body spiraling me, before I could reposition myself. Another titan with copper hair and hazel eyes but otherwise identical to the other titan kicked my ragdolling body. 2 more titans joined in on the fun, while the other 7 made their way to the border before beginning to smash it in with their weapons and powers alike. I tried defending myself in a desperate attempt while getting treated like a football by the titans. In mid-flight from a kick, I spun, the only thing I could do in this condition, plunging my spear into the ground, stopping my ragdolling. I looked at all the titans slowly breaking through the border, no matter how much I focused on it. Ukos, the thing caught itself. The red-haired titan spoke. Meh, Iapetos, who cares? Look at him, it's not like it wa seen fun to hit it anymore, it's all disfigured. To prove his words correct, my body involuntarily spat some blood onto the ground beneath me. I started using my dark threads, unifying the bones in my body little by little. I needed to heal, I needed to fight. Yet as that thought crossed through my hands, a shattering noise reached my ears as I felt the connection to my dome wane completely. The titans had broken through. Thalia, misery, POV. Ozzy's shadow dome had shattered, menacing one of 2 possibilities: either the titans had broken through with their own strength or... Yet my doubts were answered in that exact moment as right in front of me Ozzy's broken body appeared. I ran to him worriedly, yet just as I was about to make him drink some nectar I had with me, I heard his voice. Did you evacuate who you could? Yes, we did. Everyone else is prepared to fight, not you, just need to rest. I answered, which was true. He has given us 20 minutes, more than enough time for demigods, to both evacuate or strap their armor and weapons to prepare for war. I brought him into my father's cabin since that was where I had been standing outside of placing him one of the beds, and making him drink some ambrosia before going back outside to meet Annabeth, Luke, the copycat, and to face the Titans. Unknown place, unknown time. You know, being trapped in this place for almost 4 years inside the misery realm is pretty weak. I expected more from my offspring and an anomaly, though I do guess that you are fighting another of my children, so I guess either way my genes turn out to be pretty strong. The primordial voice rang inside my head, making me open my eyes, though I couldn't move, not even a single fear. Yet something had changed from the past years. I had lost my eyesight once more, being able to see solely in black and white. Shut up, I'm tired. Now that isn't a good way to speak to your daddy, old dad, now is it? I simply stayed silent at his words, tired beyond belief. I mean, I could give you a way out, but I'm not sure you can take it. Meh, I'll give it to you, take it as your 13th birthday gift, let's see how much you can take. Omicron pi lambda iota omicron nu sigma beta sigma omicron nu tau phi sigma omicron upsilon, opal dim your light. Kappa omicron upsilon epsilon tau nu pi alpha lambda lambda alpha gamma nu tau eta nu, hear this fatal plea. Omicron tau nu mu mu omicron nu tau omicron Cairo nu omicron upsilon pi iota tau epsilon nu omicron nu tau epsilon, spur the sands of time. Kappa alpha tau pi nu epsilon mu alpha lambda epsilon theta epsilon rho omicron nu pi omicron iota omicron nu tau epsilon, and set the spirit free. Mu alpha rho alpha nu epsilon iota kappa alpha sigma pi epsilon tau alpha iota, wither and decay. Tau epsilon lambda epsilon upsilon tau sigma alpha tau epsilon tau nu mu omicron rho alpha nu tau alpha tau eta nu, and this destiny. Sigma pi sigma alpha tau epsilon tau gamma epsilon iota nu omicron mu nu alpha lambda sigma epsilon iota, break these earthly chains. Kappa alpha tau pi nu epsilon mu alpha lambda epsilon theta epsilon rho omicron nu pi omicron iota omicron nu tau epsilon, and set the spirit free. Tau pi nu epsilon mu alpha lambda epsilon theta epsilon rho omicron nu, the spirit free. I tried listening to everything, but I could only make out fractions of it, meaning I only heard or could understand omicron pi lambda iota omicron nu sigma beta sigma omicron nu. I knew it was in ancient Greek, I simply couldn't understand the rest. Welp, that's enough help from daddy, to the misery realm you go. Misery dream, unknown time. I was laying in a bed which I didn't know how the words my father had spoken clear in my mind. I didn't know why, but instinctually I said them aloud, my voice coming off in a weird tone, almost primordial like. Omicron pi lambda iota omicron nu sigma beta sigma omicron nu dot. The words were said slowly, almost at a rhythm or a melody, yet as soon as I said them, power surges within me, my broken bones were fixed quickly as the dark threads ran through my body, fixing everything that could find. Time to go kill some titans, I said, surprised at the strength in my voice, before leaving the cabin. Yet what I sensed through my shadows was something I had never wanted to see, the bodies of everyone, Thalia, Chiron, Percy, Annabeth and even Luke, all dead with missing parts at the doors of Camp Half-Blood, a safe haven for demigods, and yet the perpetrators were simply munching some campers. A wild scream full of desperation ripped through my throat. The titans heard my scream, looking towards me in surprise, the two words I had just learned echoing louder in my head: Omicron pi lambda iota Omicron nu sigma beta sigma Omicron nu, Omicron pi lambda iota Omicron nu sigma beta sigma Omicron nu, Omicron pi lambda iota Omicron nu sigma beta sigma Omicron nu. Without a second thought I appeared in front of the titans, giant tendrils eclipsing even them, rushed at them, penetrating the heads of all of them except for one who had dodged it with its scythe. Golden ichor mixed with the red blood-stained ground, beneath my feet. The titans' dead bodies smashed into the ground, yet my tendrils continued tearing through them. Kronos, the titan of time, could only say through both distorted and feminine voice, "What are you?" I didn't answer, simply summoning my spear band, throwing it at the mad titan. He dodged it by titling his head aside, but I teleported once more, reappearing in my spear's shadow before catching it, turning it, and shooting it once more into the titan's chest, before he could react. Teleporting onto my spear once more, shadows started entering my body, more and more each millisecond, my black eyes shining with primal power. My spear responded in kind to my increase in power, thrusting the spear deeper into Kronos' chest through its ribs before bursting apart the heart of the Lord of Time. Not enough, I murmured, standing over the titan's body, looking at the stars which had previously looked so beautiful. The words Omicron pi lambda iota Omicron nu sigma beta sigma Omicron nu kept echoing in my mind as if it were a calling. More tendrils, shadows, and darkness gathered around me, making me stronger by the second. Even the stars seemed to timber in my presence, as the sky started to shatter, pieces of it falling at my sides before shattering as they hit the gold-red blood-stained earth. Real World, September 10th. Achilles POV. I didn't know what was happening. The boy had begun to release massive amounts of misery, which was all well and good. That was normal. The not so normal part was that the more his misery increased, so did his power. I was beginning to lose control of his consciousness rapidly. Yet just as I thought that two eyes previously completely white now looked upon me with the same darkness my father had, I didn't know what I had awoken, simply that it was my death. Greek myth fact: I'm gonna talk about my favorite titan, Iapetos. Iapetos was one of the elder titans. Led by Kronos, Iapetos and his brothers ambushed their father as he descended to lie with Gaia. Khaos, Koios, Hyperion and Iapetos were posted at the four corners of the world, where they seized hold of the Uranus and held him fast, while Kronos castrated him with a sickle. Iapetos and his three brothers probably represent the four pillars of the cosmos, which are described in Near Eastern cosmogonies, holding heaven and earth apart. Iapetos himself would have been the pillar of the West, a position later held by his son Atlas. When the Titanes were later cast into the pit of Tartarus, their cosmological role shifts from being supports of heaven to bearers of the entire cosmos. Iapetos the Piercer was probably also the Titan god, symbolizing mortality and the mortal lifespan, as his sons Prometheus and Epimetheus were the creators of mankind and all other mortal creatures. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/J2N4C5V7. Chapter 53, Killing a Sister, Ending 6th Trial. Amazon Rainforest, September 10, 2003. You. My voice resounded still primordial-like, looking at Achilles' form backdashing when I finally awoke. You have to be kidding me. Achilles, my half-sister, muttered. I could begin to feel my power start to fade no matter how much I repeated Omicron Pi Lambda Iota Omicron Nu Sigma Beta Sigma Omicron Nu in my mind, so I had to act fast. Summoning all the power from the surrounding darkness, they shot out from almost everywhere, ensnaring Achilles' form. You may be a child of Protagonoi, no matter what, you are still weaker than even your death-mist titans. My voice spat out. This shouldn't be possible. I'm eternal. I was born before even Gaia herself. I was born from the eldest Erebus, and Nyx, you're only a half-blood. She yelled, scratching her sunken cheeks with her claws, trying to use the surrounding mist to enclose me back into those dreams, yet the mist slipped through me almost as if I were a shadow. I stayed silent at her wretched screaming, summoning my spear into my hand before lunging forward and piercing her head, as the ensnaring tendrils grew barbs and plunged themselves into Achilles, tearing her into shreds as she dissipated into golden dust. Finally she was giving me a headache. I muttered, my spear disappearing into my tattoo as I grabbed my head with my hands, feeling the power slowly leaving me, making me slightly weaker than before, and my eyes changed from completely black to white, sclera and all. Still, I need to find the Amazons and the Solemwa tribes. I already spent almost 3 months here, what a waste of time. But as I felt my overpowering connection to shadows and darkness, I finished my sentence, well, maybe not so much of a waste. 3 weeks later. Aig. A yelp of pain reached my ears. Ares will kill you for this. Raising my spear from her torso, I simply replied, add him to the list. The woman who had been bleeding under me, that sounds wrong, turned into a puff of smoke. Still, who would have thought that the Solemwa and the Amazons would have been so close together? I mean, they were like less than a mile apart. Weird how they didn't kill each other already. Yet just as I said that, an arrow flew at me, but I simply dodged by tilting my head to the side. I mean, it was fast, but the golden hind was way faster than whatever these tribes could throw at me. Raising my arm, I winded it up slightly as shadows started entering my heels and strengthening myself. Ali up! I muttered, throwing the spear in the direction of where the arrow had been shot. A barrier from almost breaking the speed of sound formed at its tips. The spear found its mark, nailing the woman and impaling her on the next tree, something which was thankfully in abundance here. Come on, Dad, take me to your realm. How many more of these people do I have to kill before it counts to completing my quest? That sounded slightly racist. I muttered while I walked over to the now dying woman, grasping my spear and impaling her head, which made her turn into golden dust. As I looked upon the scene which I had caused, even though I couldn't see colors, the heat from the fires, not my fault, the Amazons put fire on the arrows which burnt their tents, 10 black splatters which were probably golden blood. Basically it didn't look pretty even in my eyes. Still, they got it better than the Solemwa. I muttered, shuddering at how incompetent that tribe was. I think they killed each other more than I did. Honestly, it wasn't surprising how Bellerophon was able to beat them. When that thought passed through my head, I started feeling sleepy, falling unconscious and hitting the ground with a resounding thud. Unknown place, unknown time. You know kiddo, you did a good job with Achilles, but come on, couldn't you have given her a quicker death? Not like death matters to us primogenitors, but Nux gave me an earful, so please, if you go after another, at least tell me before you decide to knock, kill, one out, for a few days. Couldn't control myself, the hag had it coming. I replied, simply shrugging my shoulders. Ha, okay then, either way your 7th labor is gonna be an easy one. You just need to do something that Achilles once did, beat Hector, tamer of horses. Your tip is simple this time. Underworld. Welp, I can't wait to finally meet you in person. A shade portal appeared underneath me, bringing me back to the mortal realm. So Underworld, hey, that isn't that hard. Where did Dad say it was located? Think Odysseus, think. I said lightly, hitting my head trying to remember. It was at times like this I would have loved to be a kid of Athena, since they remember everything they either heard or saw. After a few minutes of trying to remember, the memory finally came back to me. The Underworld was in Los Angeles, though Dad did say that the location changed slightly depending on the year. This is going to be very boring. In that moment I sunk once more into my shadow. Los Angeles, September 28, 2003. Los Angeles was bad to say the least. It was crowded, smelled like misery, which didn't exactly bring fond memories to me. Basically it was probably the perfect to hide a demigod, since with the amount of people, bad smell, and misery, a demigod would be just another person in this place for a monster's sense of smell. I honestly thought I had confused a few people for demigods given how much the mist stuck to them. Still, in the end I was able to get to the D.O.A recording studios, dead on arrival. After all, if the fact that it was written in ancient Greek wasn't a big enough of a giveaway, the line of dead people definitely was. Cutting in line, hearing the yells of certain Karen souls was weird. After all, there was no one there, but in fact there were hundreds. It was a weird feeling. Inside the place, souls gathered even more closely, expectantly looking at the man inside, which slightly less mist swirling around him than Achilles. Walking up to the man who was wearing an Italian suit and glasses, hair shaved military style, and a smile that enraptured even the dead. Get it? He seemed to notice me walking in. Pretty easy when I was the only person who was alive in here. If that isn't the man of the hour. He laughed, leaving his station and coming closer, slapping my shoulders as the dad simply looked at us, muttering complaints about the time. Thank you. No, I should be thanking you. You finally shut up that old hag. She was such a bother in here. She didn't stop visiting and distrusting the souls. It would do good on her to reform in a few days. Seeing his good mood, I quickly asked, well then, can you let me through? His laugh stopped dead in its tracks. Listen kid, I can't exactly let you in even if you are family, though it could be slightly different if you know. He trailed off, showing me his open palm. Greedy family member. I muttered, reaching down into my shadow's inventory, grabbing 10 golden drachmas and sneakily placing them in his hand. He looked at the golden drachmas I had placed in his hand with an incredulous look. What is this, ancient Greece? These are worth squat ion to be able to buy a single suit with these. Give me the real deal. He said, handing me back my drachmas and opening his palm once more. Stingy. I muttered, before grabbing a few $100 from my shadow, and giving it to him. Now we're talking. With this you can even get a personal ride. He laughed, stashing the money in his pockets without wrinkling any part of his suit. Greek myth fact: Charon was the ferryman of the dead, an underworld daimon in the service of King Hades. Hermes Psychopompus, guide of the dead, gathered the shades of the dead from the upper world and led them down to the shores of the Acracean Mere in the underworld, where Charon transported them across the waters to Hades in his skiff. His fee was a single obolos coin, which was placed in the mouth of a corpse upon burial, though this notion seems to be of late origin, for it does not occur in any of the early poets of Greece. Those who had not received proper burial were unable to pay the fee and were left to wander the earthly side of the Acheron, haunting the world as ghosts. Charon was depicted in ancient Greek art as an ugly, bearded man with a crooked nose, wearing a conical hat and tunic. He was shown standing in his skiff holding a pole, about to receive a shade from Hermes Psychopompus. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/J2N4C5V7. Chapter 54, 7th Trial starts. Underworld, September 28, 2003. So how long have you been in this gig? I asked, trying to make some idle conversation with the ferryman of the dead, who was also my half-brother, weirdly enough. You don't have to talk, I am accustomed to be alone with my thoughts in these rides. Okay. I replied, shutting up, though there was still an awkward silence, at least for me. Trying to take my mind off thinking about a conversation, I started looking overboard. The boat slowly and steadily made its way through the river Styx, the river was way more polluted than anyone would expect, with stuff like broken toys, ripped up diplomas, which made everything kind of depressing. Still, the distinct thing about the river weren't the physical manifestation of broken dreams, but that the river kept on calling me to jump in, not in a malicious way. In fact, it felt that if I jumped I would be where I belonged. You shouldn't jump. Karen's voice interrupted my increasing want of swimming in the rivers. The rivers in here always try to get new souls, but the Styx is even worse for children of divine beings related to death, so don't jump. I also wanted to do so at first, but a nice slap on the back of the head from Mom broke that dream pretty quickly, and I've grown accustomed to its call. Understood, I won't swim in the river. But as I said those words, my hand shot out into the river almost instinctually, mere inches away. I met Ross from the river hitting my hand before it could enter the river. Off H. I yelped in pain, which was weird since I had been punctured, slashed, and thrown around like a rag dolling, but this hurt just as much. Dude, I just told you not to do it, come on, at least try a bit. Sorry. I replied, cleaning the burning drops of the river from my hand. A few more minutes of peaceful yet awkward silence, the boat came to a stop. This is your spot, just make sure you are careful with the doggy, he is still too young and acts like a pup. I simply nodded at his words, though my attention was simply enraptured by the giant walls that encircled almost the entire realm, the walls of Erebus. I walked closer to the main gate and by consequence the walls themselves. My eyes were still looking at the walls even as I got closer to the main gate with rows of dead souls. As I kept looking at the walls, hundreds of familiar-looking eyes started appearing across the walls. Hi son. My father's primordial voice echoed in my head, stay there for a second, I'm gonna come get you for your 7th trial. Finishing his sentence from one of the biggest eyes, black tears, well, I saw everything in black and white, started dripping, collecting itself and forming the shape of a handsome man if his features were anything to go by. Tendrils on his head that acted as his hair slicked back, wearing a jeans and a hoodie. He was my godly father, one of the eldest protogenoi, the embodiment of darkness itself, Arabus. Sup? His voice thundered now, his body only a few feet away from me. Sup? Was the only thing I could reply as I was in complete awe, since my control from darkness and shadows minimized the closer he got. No matter how much I willed it, the powers that had always had my back now traveled back to its origin. Welp, I guess we should get your 7th trial done as soon as possible, kiddo, after all your girl is still waiting. My father smirked. She isn't mine. I yelped back. Your misery dream begs to differ, let's just hope she actually reciprocates your feelings. My father replied as he laughed, before placing his hand on my shoulder, and we were teleported to another place. Hades Palace, September 28, 2003. Hades. A man wearing a helmet appeared before us at my father's call. Hades, wait a damn minute, I could actually see an Olympian. How was that possible? I hadn't been able to see Dionysus, Artemis, or any other Olympian in the camp's visits to Mount Olympus. Don't worry, I upgraded your sight in your 5th trial, it's also the reason you were able to see Achilles. Had to do some tweaking to their shadows since they showed their true form, and that would have burnt your eyes out, which while you can't see yet, I will still feel slightly bad if that happened. After all, you're my first mortal son. My father's voice thundered at his words, slightly scared if I had actually seen the Olympian's true form, because my eyes were already disturbing enough from what the campers said. If I had no eyes, I couldn't even fathom how many kids would have nightmares from my empty eye sockets. Erebus, what do you need? Hades inquired in front of us. Bring us Hector's soul from Elysium. Hades nodded in reply, snapping his fingers, making a man appear in front of us. Hey, where am I? Come on, I was in the middle of a drinking contest. The man looked around for a second before kneeling in front of Hades. Lord Hades, you have summoned me. Yeah, they need you. Hades replied, pointing at me, probably since pointing at my father, his direct superior, would be disrespectful. Indeed, young Hector, you must spar with my son on a one-on-one, until he bests you in all forms of combat. So your cooperation in this endeavor would be most helpful. After all, bending the wills of souls is always bad for the soul in question. Hector's face whitened. I honestly couldn't tell at my father's words, probably because of his voice. I mean, I had grown accustomed to it, but it was powerful if anything. Understood, sire. Okay then, Hades, take them both to Elysium, my son will stay there until the end of his quest. Hades nodded, and before I could even get a word in, he snapped his fingers and both Hector and I reappeared in a new place. Well, at least for me, the place was beautiful to say the least. It looked like an idealized suburban district with houses from differing eras. Elysium, September 28, 2003. So, what's your name, kid? Hector asked me, his gaze slightly nervous. I'm Odysseus, but you can call me Ozzy. Odysseus, hey, that brings back some not so fond memories, so I think I'll just call you Ozzy. I also need to call Odysseus that the next time I see him. Hector replied, making an eerie face unbefitting of a 3,000-year-old Trojan hero. Ozzy, is that you? A familiar voice yelled in between the crowd of heroes surrounding us. I looked at the person whom the voice belonged to, his blue aura shining brightly against the green of every other hero. It was Hugh, a large smile on his face, yet my face fell when I immediately came to a conclusion: Hugh and probably Kevin had died on their quest. Greek myth fact: the next few facts will be about the different parts of the underworld. Today it will be the river Styx. The river Styx is the principal and best known river of Hades, circling the underworld 7 times, thus separating it from the land of the living. The Styx flowed out of Oceanus, the great river of the world. In Greek, the word Styx means to hate or abhor, and it was named after the nymph of the river, a daughter of the Titans Oceanus and Tethys. Cerberus, a monstrous dog with multiple heads and the tail of a serpent, waits on the further side of the Styx where Charon lands with the shades of the departed. Homer called Styx the dread river of oath. Zeus used a golden jug of water from the Styx to settle disputes among the gods. If a god swore falsely by the water, he would be deprived of nectar and ambrosia for a year and banished from the company of other gods for 9 years, left out the part of Achilles' cause. I feel that everyone knows that. LOL. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/J2N4C5V7. Chapter 55, Hector, Hugh, and Kevin. Elysium Underworld, September 28, 2003. So Ozzy, what are you doing in here? Hugh asked. I mean, it's not every day you see a living being in the underworld, especially Elysium. I'm completing a labor. You? I said, the question laced with a slight amount humor in my tone. Got killed on my own quest. Turns out fighting a giant doesn't really turn out well. I could drink nectar to that. I replied, remembering the time I fought Alcyoneus and his shades and nearly died. Where's Kevin? Is he here too? I asked, since it had been a few years since I last saw him, obviously cause he died on his quest. Nah, sorry man, he isn't here. Decided to reincarnate since he wants to reach the Isles of the Blessed. Hugh replied sadly, maybe cause Hugh and Kevin had arrived here together without knowing anyone else and he was then left alone in this new place. Why didn't you? I wondered. After all, tales of the Isles of the Blessed were things normally discussed back at camp, making almost everyone dream of reaching it. Too much of a hassle. Besides, I ain't guaranteed to actually ace my next 2 lives. This place is good enough for me. A voice then interrupted our conversation as Hugh and I walked across the streets. Ozzy, when should we start your labor? I have stuff to do. In time, Hector, let me catch up with my friend here. The 3 of us walked around Elysium, visiting the hearths, monuments, and temples. Hugh came to a stop as we came before a suburban modern house in mostly white and black with shades of grey throughout. So this is my place. It's been nice talking to you again. You can always come visit me as long as you stay here. Now go with Hector, the dude is redder than a tomato. I looked back at Hector and he was indeed as red as a tomato, no, even redder than that. He looked like a burnt chili pepper. Hugh walked into his house with a final goodbye, after which I turned to Hector. Okay, Hector, no need to get so pent up about a slight detour. We can start our spar wherever you want. Slight detour, slight detour. We have been in a detour for 4 hours. Amidst his yelling, which I wasn't really paying attention to, I noticed something. We had been talking in ancient Greek the whole time. I wasn't even making a conscious effort or realized it until now. Finishing his rant between ragged breaths, Hector simply looked at me with a ferocious look. So where are we sparring? With a tired sigh he replied, follow me, we are gonna need to walk a bit more. Hector's strides were long and determined, almost as if he was trying to leave his frustration in the dust behind us. We followed a path that snaked through groves of trees, their leaves shimmering like silver. It wasn't long before an amphitheater-looking structure came into view. We walked into the structure and I noticed the tens of smooth round arenas, a huge amount of rows of seats encircling all of them and a smaller one planted at the end of every arena, probably for people who wanted to watch a specific match. Hector led me to one of the middle arenas, a small crowd of past heroes gathering already as I heard murmurs of people coming to see the battle of Hector against an unknown fighter. As we neared the arena, Hector grabbed a spear from one of the weapon racks at the side of the arena. He turned to look at me, but my hand simply shone slyly, my trusty spear appearing in my hand as a response. Hector looked at the spear, a grim face appearing in his visage, probably since he recognized the spear that had killed him in the mortal realm. Looks like you have a good one, I'm gonna enjoy beating it out of you. Hector said, an impish grin spreading across his face. It was clear to see that while he had no feud against me, looking at the spear had given him a small fire of excitement for our fight. We took our positions, spears at the ready, when suddenly a man I recognized clearly from his tendril-like black hair, my dad, just now that he was sporting a referee attire and cap. I'll be the overseer for this match. The rules are simple. You can only rely on your spear, that is to say you can't use powers of any type. The match will end once you have landed that would have killed your opponent. My father's primordials rang through the arenas, the rules more related to me than Hector, but who cares. Now 3,2,1 begin. At the exact moment he called our match to begin, hundreds of replicas of my dad took place in the stands with big baseball gloves with the number 1 on it and t-shirts that said "Go Aussie." Come on Aussie. Show him what my genes do. Make your daddy proud. Boo, Hector. Hector, you're washed up. My dad kept on shouting words of encouragement to me, while quite literally clowning on Hector, which made me feel slightly awkward, while Hector simply looked at the copies of Dad with a befuddled expression. Come on, I said, start already. The referee copy of my dad shouted, sending us out of our stupor before both Hector and I dashed at each other. A few feet from each other we both performed a lunge with our spears, trying to end this as quickly as possible. In mid-lunge I noticed that my spear was slightly smaller than his, so in a swift move, I moved my backhand to the end of the spear, getting the leverage needed to turn it upwards, deflecting Hector's strike and allowing me to close in. But Hector was still one of the legendary warriors from the Trojan War, probably only bested by people like Achilles or Diogenes if the books were anything to go by. In response to my strike he turned left, dodging my lunge and allowing him enough time to take control of his spear once more before bringing it down with a quick ferocity. Watching the point, yes that is its name, of the spear making its way towards me, I rolled to the side, dodging the strike. The dust settled around the arena as I regained my footing while Hector encircled, not going for the win while I was on the ground because I had my spear at the ready all the time. The crowds, dad copies, anticipation palpable in the air. I didn't know how, but I could see or feel Hector's eyes alight with the thrill of combat, the same as mine. Nice move, I called out, acknowledging his skill. Hector merely nodded, his focus unbroken, the spear blending into his grip showing his mastery over the weapon, but I was better. We circled each other, each step measured, each breath a silent countdown to the next clash. My dad's copies' cheers faded into a distant echo. In the space between heartbeats, there was only Hector and me and our spears. Then, like twin bolts sent out by Zeus himself, we struck. Spear in hand I started piercing quickly, trying to get through Hector's defenses and land a winning strike. But no matter how fast I performed each of my lunges, he blocked with his shaft, redirecting my spear slyly each time. Our spears met once, splinters from Hector's spear staining the arena at our feet. I feinted left, but Hector read me like a book, his almost 3,000 years of existence coming in handy. His counter was swift, aimed at where I would have been had I not anticipated his anticipation. In a fluid motion, I dropped to one knee, Hector's spear whisking above my head. Using the momentum to spin, I swept Hector's legs. But he seemed to expect even that move as he jumped over my improvised trap. Mid-air he took control of his spear with an unforeseen speed and thrust it at my chest. Time slowed, and in that moment, I could see through my vision every single of Hector's muscles twitching, his course laid bare before me. I could win. With a twist of my wrist, I redirected his spear into the ground, pinning it momentarily. Still on the ground, Hector's spear nailed to the ground and his body a few inches above, I aimed my own spear at Hector's heart, impaling him slyly as Pelion, my spear, seemed to shake in joy at winning against Hector with both of its users. I win. I muttered, a tired yet prideful smile gracing my face. After all, it had been a long time since I last fought without my powers. It made me realize how much I depended on them. My dad announced me as the victor immediately, showing the true end of the match. Hector conceded, well fought, he acknowledged, a slight bitterness in his voice, probably cause he lost to a 13-year-old, though spears were my forte. The cheers of my dad's copies kept on roaring at my victory like a proud father at his son's baseball match. Yet as I enjoyed my father's roars of approval, all the copies formed into one, appearing in front of me once more. You won the spear match, kid. Honestly, I expected it. Wow, I'll take you a few more tries until you beat Hector at this, but hey, you proved me wrong, he said, his voice a blend of pride and challenge. Now you just have to beat him at everything else. He continued with an impish grin. Hearing his words, I could only reply with one sentence that encapsulated my feelings. Oh, come on. Hector seemed to have heard my father's words as he cracked his knuckles, a smile from ear to ear appearing on his face, because if it had been this close with a spear, one of the two weapons I was proficient in, he was going to beat my ass at the rest. Greek myth fact: today's fact is gonna be about Hector, since I haven't talked about him yet. Hector was a prince and hero of Troy, the firstborn son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy, and thus the heir to the Trojan throne. He married the princess Andromache, with whom he had a son named Astyanax. Hector was a great warrior, much admired not only for his military skill and bravery but also for his nobility and sense of duty. During the Trojan War, he led the Trojan forces against the invading Greeks for nearly 10 years. When Achilles, the greatest of the Greek heroes, refused to fight because of a quarrel with the Greek commander Agamemnon, Hector nearly managed to drive the Greeks from Troy once and for all. He also fought Ajax the Great to a draw, previously giving him his prized sword, which Ajax would later use to kill himself. But when Hector killed Achilles' best friend Patroclus in battle, Achilles turned the full force of his anger on Hector. The two heroes fought before the walls of Troy, and Hector ultimately fell to Achilles. With Hector dead, Troy had lost its greatest protector. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/J2N4C5V7. Chapter 56, Elysium Battles. 2 weeks later. Elysium Underworld, October 9, 2003. Come on, Menelaus! I yelled at the top of my lungs in the bar. Looking as Menelaus, a previous king of Sparta, and George Washington arm wrestled while drinking glasses of beer with their other hands. Redhead against redhead, two famous leaders duking it out in the most manly way possible. Slowly Menelaus started beating Washington. Little by little the first president's fist drew nearer to the table, but he never stopped chugging beer. Yet. No. Shouts rang out as Washington's fist touched the table. You won fair and square, Menelaus. Washington said, standing up unsteadily, probably because of all the alcohol in his system. Ha ha ha, this battle was exciting, but now cough up the drachmas. I want to visit Helen as soon as possible. I am already past my bedtime. Everyone started exchanging drachmas in accordance to the bets. I had bet on Menelaus obviously and made a small profit of 6 golden drachmas. Ozzy, what are you doing here? A voice reached my ears as I left the bar with Menelaus, making my way back to Hector's home, my temporary abode in the underworld. Turning around, I saw my host and my challenger, Hector. Diomedes invited me. He's my favorite hero, I couldn't exactly refuse him. Come on, since you are already awake we should spar one more time, after all it's already 6 AM. Hector said as he walked past me, and grabbed my collar, dragging me to the sparring arenas. No please, I've just pulled an all-nighter and have been sparring against you 2 weeks. I wailed, trying, but not really, to get out of his grip. The past 2 weeks hadn't been really eventful, it was basically doing the same thing over and over, meeting Hugh in the morning, talking a bit. Then going to the sparring arenas where Hector and I dueled before a growing crowd each time. Thought most of them were still just copies of my dad. I had been able to beat Hector at the spear and the bow in the first 2 days, but when we changed to swords, even with my experience in the misery trials, the tamer of horses kept on beating me each time. Honestly, my dad had already explained with what different weapons I had to beat Hector in a duel. The weapons I had to outclass him in were as follows: pole arms, archery, blades or swords, short swords or knives, and finally cavalry with pole arms or swords. Basically, more than beating him with weapons, I had to defeat him in a specific fighting style, so when it came to sword fights, while Hector chose the normal Greek sword, I went for a sword similar to a khapesh, since the hook of the weapon intrigued me and it was a good way to manipulate the direction of your opponent's blade. Grabbing the blade from the racks, I saw Hector do the same, and as we took positions once more, copies of my father appearing, instantly encouraging me on, something both Hector and I had gotten used to. Ready when you are, Ozzy. Hector called out. I ain't ready, I already told you I wanted to sleep. You may be dead, but I still need my sleep. I thought, but my body nodded in reply, as I couldn't exactly yell that. Hector dashed at me with more grace than he ever had with the spear or bow, performing an upward diagonal slash. I met his strike head on, capturing his sword with my hook, spinning my sword to the side, trying to disarm him. Hector moved in the direction of my spin so as to keep the sword clutches in his grip, before escaping my hook, allowing the momentum from my own move to carry him, and slashing horizontally at my neck. I ducked just in time, feeling the whoosh of Hector's blade slice through the air above me. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging as I countered with a quick jab towards his ribs. Hector blocked with a swift downward parry, his eyes sharp and focused. You're getting better, he remarked, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Thanks, I guess, still sleepy though, I muttered, already planning my next move. I needed to outthink him, not just outfight him. Hector was relentless, his strikes precise and powerful. I had to use my height, something that would normally be detrimental in a fight, and the unique shape of the Khapesh to my advantage. Hector pressed his advantage, launching a flurry of strikes that forced me to backpedal. I parried each blow, the force of his attacks resonating through my arms. Despite my fatigue, I knew I had to keep my focus sharp. One mistake could be the end of our match. As Hector aimed a thrust at my midsection, I sidestepped, using the curve of my Khapesh to hook his blade and pull it downward. Hector, quick to adapt, used the momentum to swing around and aim a low slash at my legs. I leapt back, narrowly avoiding the blade. "You're too predictable, honestly can't believe how good you are with a spear compared to swords," Hector taunted, his confidence unwavering. Ignoring his words, I circled him, looking for an opening. His stance was solid, but there was a slight gap in his defense whenever he switched from attack to defense. I needed to exploit that. Performing an overhead strike, I watched as Hector raised his sword to block. I simply smiled at that, stopping mid-slash. I performed an axe kick hitting him at his side. I could feel his rib cage bend slightly as my leg made contact. Hector stumbled slightly, so without giving him a chance to recuperate, I hooked his front ankle, throwing him to the ground, before twisting my sword and stabbing downwards at his head. Yet as my sword was mere inches away from his face, I felt a sting in my torso. Looking down, I hadn't noticed that he had changed the position of his sword, thrusting it at me, nicking my chest. "You did good in this one, but it looks like you are still too sleepy." "God damn it," was the only thing I could say in reply. 3 months later. Almost 4 months had passed since my 7th labor started. I had been making good progress when it came to beating Hector. I had realized a few weeks in I could ask other people in Elysium to teach me how to use a specific weapon. This led to me improving quickly in weapons I had never used before. In fact, I had grown fond of using dual jit knives. The jit knives were a long knife with a secondary tip attached to the handle. This allowed me to block the weapon I was facing with my first knife, and then using the second knife to capture the blade in between the two tips and breaking off the weapon. My mastery over this weapon was shown when it took me less than 3 days to beat Hector in our knife/short sword spars. Still, now I was facing Hector in the thing he was best at, the thing that made his nickname Tamer of Horses, fighting in horses, or Pegasi in this case. Greek myth fact. Today's fact will be about another part of the underworld, the river of oblivion or forgetfulness, Lethe. Lethe is the river of oblivion or forgetfulness. Upon entering the underworld, the dead would have to drink the waters of Lethe to forget their earthly existence. Lethe is also the name of the goddess of forgetfulness, who was the daughter of Eros. She watches over the river Lethe. Lethe was first mentioned as a river of the underworld in Plato's Republic. The word Lethe is used in Greek when the forgetfulness of former kindnesses results in a quarrel. Some tomb inscriptions dated to 400 BCE say the dead could keep their memories by avoiding drinking from the Lethe and drinking instead from the stream flowing from the lake of Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. Reported as a real-life body of water in modern-day Spain, Lethe was also the mythological river of forgetfulness. Lucan quotes the ghost of Julia in his Pharsalia, "Me not the oblivious banks of Lethe's stream/have made forgetful," as Horace quips that certain vintages make one more forgetful, and Lethe's true draught is Massic wine. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/j2n4c5v7. Chapter 57, Meeting My Mom and My Name. Elysium, January 4, 2004. The clash of metal against metal echoed through the sparring arena as Hector and I fought once again. My butt hurt from the riding, and the pressure that Hector kept on putting me in, with his very long lance, formerly known as a Ziston, and his higher mastery over the horse. I raised my shield blocking the Ziston, but it felt the impact threw me off the horse as I dangled from the saddle. "Damn it, this is unfair, Hector, you have more reach and you're stronger than me." I totally blocked that, yet it wasn't enough. I whined, which may have been slightly childish, but it was super unfair. I mean, the reach alone was an advantage that I couldn't close no matter how much more I improved at fighting on horseback, though I still didn't come close at what Hector could do. "Don't whine, Ozzy, it doesn't suit you, besides you are improving, that is more than enough for now." The copies of my dad in the stand melded into wine and teleport beside me, unbuckling me from my saddle, which led to me falling on the smooth cobblestone. "Come on, kid, get up, there is someone here to see you." My father, Hector, and I, still on the floor, turned to see a man standing at the edge of the arena. He had a weathered face, a short beard, eyes that seemed to embody cunningness and a slightly green aura surrounding him. Odysseus, Hector greeted him with a nod. To what do we owe this visit? I heard about this spars of yours and I wanted to tell exactly what the fuss was all about, Odysseus said with a smile. Best thing is I heard he had my name. I wiped the sweat from my brow and stepped forward. Aussie short for Odysseus, I introduced myself, extending a hand towards the person whom my name was based on. It's an honor to meet you. Likewise, Odysseus replied, shaking my hand. His grip was firm but not overpowering. I've heard much about you, Aussie. Beating Hector is not a small feat. We walked out of the arena together, leaving Hector and my father behind. Odysseus and I found a quiet spot under a large olive tree. The shade was a welcome relief from the heat of the sparring arena. So, Aussie, Odysseus began, leaning against the tree. How do you feel about your name? I chuckled. Well, besides from having the hate of a Poseidon, it is honestly pretty awesome. Yes, sorry about that, but not like it's exactly my fault, Odysseus mused. After all, I needed to reach Ithaca after the war, though thinking back on it I probably should have killed Polyphemus or at least not told him my name. I kind of fucked our name over. I laughed. I mean, under your circumstances it isn't exactly like I can fault you, but you did fuck us over. Odysseus's expression showed a grin as his green aura increased as we talked. I've heard that you're pretty good with a bow. I guess that comes with the name. We should spar sometime. I nodded at his words. After all, facing the most famous host of my name was an exciting prospect to say the least. Finishing my talk with Odysseus as we walked back to his abode, where Penelope was waiting for him, I noticed a presence appear behind me after Odysseus entered his place. His black tendril hair gave him away instantly, even though his aura alone was enough of a giveaway. It was Erebus, my father. What now, Dad? I said, looking still at the place my name holder went to. Aussie, he replied, his voice deep and resonant. It's time. Time for what? I asked. After all, I was already doing everything that this labor demanded of me. To meet your mother, Arabus said, his words echoing in my head. Arabus placed a hand on my shoulder. In an instant, the world around us shifted. The suburban houses disappearing around us, changed to mansions, lakes, and perfect shrubbery. I was won the Isles of the Blessed. Even with my blindness, I could feel the divinity emanating from the golden structures. The air was thick with a sense of peace and reverence. Before us stood a woman with a ponytail, her aura a vibrant blue that outshone everyone else I had ever met. Dad, Chiron, Kevin, Thalia, no one even came close to hers. The woman ran towards me as soon as she saw me, tears welling in her eyes, hugging me with so much strength that the air escaped from my lungs. Her embrace was both fierce and gentle, a mix of desperate longing and overwhelming love. I felt her tears on my shoulder as she held me close, and for a moment, and while this may have been an emotional moment for her, I simply felt nothing. After all, this was the first time I was seeing her. She was like a stranger that was pouring her motherly affections on me, but a stranger nonetheless. My sweet shadow, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. You've grown so much, I've missed you so much. I hugged her back simply because I had felt bad if I hadn't, but my face stayed the same as before. Yeah, hi Mom, I managed to say awkwardly. Nice to finally meet you. She backed away, seeming to notice the awkwardness in my voice. Sorry, little one, I know this may be awkward for you. How about we start over? Sure, my name is Odysseus, though most people call me Aussie, son of Chiron, Erebus and you. As she heard my name, she started mouthing it repeatedly, probably trying to remember it as soon as possible before she replied, my name is Edna, atonal daughter of Aphrodite and your mother. Wait, I'm an Aphrodite kid. Damn, Emma was right. Guess I have to apologize to her when I see her again. Trying to steer the conversation, I continued, so how come you couldn't raise me? I know it probably had something to death, but I still wonder. She sighed at my words as I noticed the sadness and disappointment in her voice. When you were born, it was the hardest and happiest moment of my life, but your own scent and mine mixed, making us prime targets for monsters, so much so that a few minuets after your birth I could tell that something was coming after us. Turns out it was a group of Lucrocatas. In that moment I had to leave you in the forest while I drew away the monsters, but sadly I was killed by them, and I Kislon't even name you. Before I passed. Without noticing, my mother and I started conversing more and more as she asked me questions about my life and I asked her about hers. Arabus also joined in on our conversation when it came to talking about their love story, which was a cool story in and of itself. My mother and a group of her friends had received a quest that had to do with taking a part of Persephone's beauty, a copy of a labor psyche one did, while in the underworld Mom's friends did things that ended up either getting enchanted by the fields of punishment, the rivers, or monsters like hellhounds. They hadn't been able to even find Persephone yet, so in despair my mother climbed up to the walls of Erebus and was about to jump when my dad formed at her side, and from there everything else came, which resulted in little old me. Our talk ended finally when we reached my mom's place in the Isles of the Blessed, where we ate cookies and Pringles that formed out of thin air. Greek myth fact: the Isles of the Blessed, in Greek mythology, the Isles of the Blessed, also known as the Fortunate Isles or the Islands of the Blessed, were a group of islands considered to be a paradisiacal afterlife realm where heroes and virtuous men resided after death. These islands were thought to exist in the Atlantic Ocean and were associated with the concept of Elysium, a utopian location in the Greek underworld. The legend states that these islands were reserved for those who had been reincarnated 3 times and had managed to be judged pure enough to gain entrance to the Elysian fields each time. The poet Pindar described the Isles of the Blessed as having shady parklands, with residents indulging in athletic and musical pastimes, embodying the ideal life for the ancient Greek aristocracy. The concept of the Isles of the Blessed evolved over time, with some accounts reducing the number of islands to 1 and others associating them with different geographical locations. They were sometimes identified with real islands near the mouth of the river Danube on the Black Sea or in the Atlantic Ocean. The Isles of the Blessed represented the ultimate reward for a life well lived, offering a peaceful and joyous existence free from the troubles of the mortal world. It was a place where the favored by the gods could dwell in eternal bliss. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/j2n4c5v7. Chapter 58, Getting Pets. Elysium, April 16, 2005. Yes, yes. I yelled in triumph, being backed up by the copies of my dad and the rest of our audience. I fell from my horse onto my back just yelling over and over, finally, 8 fucking months. I did it. That's my boy. Yes, 2 months of betting on the kid finally paid off. More screams of joy, mainly from me, rang through the arena, before a hand stretched out over me to help me out. Looks like you beat me. Thank the gods for that. I don't think I could have lasted more loses. I replied as Hector helped me up. Wanna go for a rematch? Hell no. I just won once against you, I don't believe I could do it twice in a row. I sighed while patting my horse companion that had been my steed over the past few months. Whatever you say, Ozzy, it was nice sparring against you, but we have been together for almost a full 8 months and I believe it's time for me to spend some time with my wife. Hector waved back as he left the arena with reins and spear in hand. The copies of my father melded into one before appearing in front of me. You did great, kiddo, but you still have 2 more labors to do, so let's celebrate today before you get back to your quest. Thanks, Dad. I replied, honestly, while I couldn't really say I liked my godly parent and always thought that my only true dad would be Chiron, but I guess I was wrong in the end. Even though he hadn't raised me, I could truly say Arabus was my dad, such as Edna was always my mom. My father pressed his hand on my shoulder before we sucked into his shadow, appearing once more in the Isles of the Blessed where my mother was waiting for me. Hey Mo. Before I could even get my words out, my mother rushed at me and hugged me while lifting me like a springboard. Edna, please don't kill Ozzy with your hugs, he is still alive. My mother smiled awkwardly at his words, letting me down on the floor. So Mom. I started, I've finished all my objectives in here, so I will be leaving soon. Guess it had to happen soon or later. Still, I think we spent our time together well, though I did waste those 3 months. Yet. I replied while scratching my head. Well son, your mother and I still have one more thing to give you, thought it is mostly from me. My father started speaking, before my mom hit him in the gut with his elbow. Cough. So you're present. While I still can't give you color to your eyesight, there is something I can give you. He finished. 2 huge shadows appearing at his sides, from one a fox a little smaller than an elephant and a Tibetan Mastiff looking dog as big as a lion, 2 green auras surrounding both. These cute boys are Swiper the Diomessian fox and Laylaps the dog that always catches its quarry. Swiper was a fox that could never be caught, while Laylaps was a dog that always caught its prey. They were sent after each other, but from the paradox they made, Zeus turned these cute buggers into stone. I thought they would make a good farewell present from us to you. Looking at the animals, their auras started changing from green to blue, the intensity growing as well, leading to both of they jumping onto me, licking my body, which honestly felt like a warm bath. My father grabbed both by their collars, taking them off my body before my mother spoke. So you like them? My mother asked. I love them. I answered, walking towards the fox and stuffing my face into its fur. I spent the rest of the day with my mother, father and my new pets talking about our stories or anything else we could come up with, even after months we had never gotten bored with each other. Going back with my father to Elysium, I started feeling sleepy, which was followed soon after by me falling onto the paved road unconscious or asleep, whichever way you wanted to look at it. Odysseus dreamscape, unknown time. Come on Dad, really, we were next to each other, why did you have to bring me here? Shush, it's tradition. My father's voice, more primordial than ever, echoed through my dreamscape. Besides, you're already here, so we should get started. Your 8th labor is going to be simple. You must fix your name holder's greatest regret. Your hint is. Before he could finish, I spoke. After all, I already talked to Odysseus tons of times. Some already knew his biggest regret: retrieving Achilles' armor and handing it to Ajax, right? The eyes surrounding me fell slightly as if he was disappointed that he couldn't finish his words. Okay, know it all, you're right, but you got one thing wrong. You need to place the armor in Ajax's grave. Now leave, you have ruined my fun. Wait, before you teleport me somewhere, could you please repeat the hymn you said before? I can only seem to remember the first verse: Omicron pi lambda iota Omicron nu sigma beta sigma Omicron nu tau phi sigma Omicron upsilon, opal dim your light, dot. Don't worry about the hymn, you will remember the rest in time. It wouldn't matter how many times I repeated it. Honestly, I didn't think you would have gotten this far by now. Okay then. I sighed, slightly disappointed at his words. After all, each time I remembered the hymn I could feel my connections to shadows grow much stronger the more of it I sang. Oh come on, don't be like that, I'll give you something else. I was then sucked into the floor beneath me. When I opened my eyes once more, I sensed that I was in a place surrounded by walls which looked like an aqueduct. I also sensed something else inside my shadow, 2 live presences on it. Come on out. From my shadow, Swiper and Labyrinth. Swiper was almost too big for the tunnel, so in my amazement I saw how Swift started shrinking quickly until he was the size of a house cat before jumping onto my shoulders as I scratched his chin. Jumping onto Labyrinth, I scratched her head, before yelling, "Let's go guys!" Greek myth fact: short chapter. I know the next ones will be longer, I promise. The Dionysian fox was a giant fox sent by the gods to ravage the countryside of Thebes as punishment for some crime. Creon, regent of Thebes, commanded Amphitryon destroy the fox, an impossible task, for the beast was destined never to be caught. The hero solved the problem by setting the magical dog Labyrinth on the trail, for it was destined to always catch its quarry. Zeus, faced with a paradox of fate, an uncatchable fox being pursued by an inescapable dog, turned the pair to stone, so freezing their contest in time. Chances of Ozzy at beating Hector. Spear, 9 in 10 battles. Swords, 7 in 10. Bows, 10 in 10. Short swords or daggers, 8 in 10. Horse riding, 2 in 10. Shields, 5 in 10. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/j2n4c5v7. Chapter 59, Where Am I? Unknown place, April 18, 2005. The place I had been teleported was weird to say the least. My sight, which previously in 360 degrees, was now locked only to the 180 degrees in front of me. I couldn't sense anything on the other side of the walls I was crossing, but I knew things were there because every once in a while I crossed a rat or cockroach. Master, this place is giving me a bad feeling. Why don't we shadow travel away? Don't be scared, Swiper. Besides, aren't you uncatchable? If Dad teleported us here, then it has to probably do its the labor. Let's see. Odysseus' biggest regret was taking Achilles' armor for himself and not giving it to Ajax, who deserved it more, which later led to Ajax killing himself because of the disgraceful he had suffered in the camp. But what happened to the armor after Odysseus' passing? While it could be true it was passed along Odysseus' bloodline, I don't think that's what happened, especially considering that Hephaestus was the person who forged the armor. The most probable thing is that Hephaestus took it back. The bad thing is, if that's true, that I have no clue where Hephaestus would be. He is one of the more introverted Olympians. Still, with my new upgraded sight, at least I wouldn't miss him if we bumped into each other. A shadow tendril emerged from my own shadow with a compass in its grip, a tool I hadn't used for several months. I then started thinking about Hephaestus and his forge. The needle began spinning, trying to locate the thing I wanted like always, but the weird thing is that it never stopped spinning. 15 minutes went by where the needle continued to spin. I thought it may just be that it was taking it a while to locate him, but I simply decided to give up on the compass, placing it back in my shadow. There was only one other time when the compass didn't work, and that was when I thought of Thalia, which it couldn't pinpoint after she had been turned into a tree. So there were 3 possibilities as to why the compass wasn't working. The first and most improbable is that Hephaestus had died or been imprisoned. the second was that my compass simply couldn't pinpoint a god, and my third hypothesis, whatever place I was in, it was disrupting the compass just like it was disrupting my sight. The last one was the one which I was leaning towards the most. Master, Labyrinth said in a worried tone. Yet, I replied, you have been quiet for a long time. I was just thinking. I added, if this place really was disrupting, then I needed to find a way to get out. Labyrinth, I questioned, thinking of one way to try and figure out where Hephaestus or his forge were. Can you track down either Hephaestus or his forge? I could, but I need something with its scent, if not I won't be able to track it. That's disappointing. I sighed, scratching her fur while still seated on her back. After all, it was a good and fast way to get around. I didn't need to rely on shadow travel, and she was super fluffy. Then let's head forward. I gestured, Labyrinth picking up pace once more, while Swiper clung tightly, almost digging his claws into my back. 40 minutes later. Trekking through the tunnels, my sight and Swiper saw something that intrigued me and made me realize where I was. The walls we were taking were constantly changing and shifting, slightly etching as deeper and deeper into the tunnels. Yet as we moved deeper and the shifting of the walls became more erratic every second, I realized where we were. We were in Deadless Labyrinth. It was the only thing that made sense. When I thought that, it felt as if the labyrinth itself answered me. I could feel it rumble even when I was on Labyrinth's back. Mist started leaking through the gaps in the walls, trying to disrupt me. Why did Dad send me here? I asked, mostly to myself. I already seemed to know the answer to my question. I was here because Hephaestus was here. Still, it felt ironic that the god of the forge was in a place forged by another. Boom, crack. Walls appeared, slime and mist dripping from them like molten lava. The walls blocked all our routes. Drum. The floor beneath us retracted into the walls, making us fall into the deep darkness where more mist seems to cling to me and my companions. I summoned tendrils around us, catching us from our falls before commanding them to descend us slowly, into the darkness below. We finally reached the floor beneath us. Looking at where we seemed to be in a simple circular room. The floor was tiled with mosaics, torches sprung into life on the walls, the blaze lighting this room, though it didn't matter much to me. The room seemed to expand. No, it did expand when the torches lit, making the room 4 times grander than before. A fountain sprouted in front of us, breaking apart the tiled mosaic that covered the ground. A painting appeared on the front wall, of people feasting. I realized they were the gods, that they looked slightly different than they normally did. I dismounted Labyrinth, wanting to investigate this place. After all, this was the first room we had found, instead of just tunnels, and more tunnels. I felt a presence appear beneath us. Turning around, I knew instinctively how it was another progenitor. What was that? The fourth one already, maybe more. Dressed in doorman attire, mist clung to him more than even the labyrinth walls, but slightly less than Karen. His 2 identical faces on one head gave away his identity immediately. It was Janus, god of doorways, choices, beginning and ends. Still, I realized something when I looked at Janus, something I hadn't thought of since my time with the Cain family, the existence of Roman gods. Janus was a Roman god, a uniquely Roman god. He had no Greek equivalent. Something clicked in my head. The portrait of the Olympians, they weren't Greek gods, they were Roman. Hello, dear demigod. Why are you greeting him? He's going to die anyway. The 2 heads, one with a light smile, the other with a small frown. The dichotomy was something to behold, especially when I realized I couldn't look at both faces at the same time. 2 doors with archways appeared underneath the portrait of the dining Roman Olympians. Janus paid no heed to the rumbling of his doors. Each face just said one simple statement. Lucky you, you got something Roman, aren't we better? Unlucky that Jupiter hasn't killed you yet for stealing something of his. Janus' words brought out a memory, from something which I had almost forgotten about, the golden eagle that I found at Alcyoneus ice camp. It belonged to Jupiter. Well, I'm fucked. Indeed you are. Good to see you figured it out. So what am I supposed to do? Choose one of the doors? I said with a deadpan face as I looked at the god and the doors behind him. Why, yes, you must choose one of our doors. Both faces replied at the same time, their voices turning into one. The face with a small smile added, through one door you will achieve what you need. The other face continued the sentence, and through the other you will get what you want. Simple enough, I guess. I need to go through the door where I'll get what I need. Sure, the one that I want may be better in the long term, but if other stories were anything to go by, choosing what you wanted instead of what you needed always turned out bad for the hero. Okay, then which is the door that gives me what I need? The left one? The right one? Don't tell me this dude's faces perform that one lies and the other tells the truth. Cliché. Thank God for my dad's, Chiron, riddles, which already gave me one similar to this. What would the other face say is the door of needs? Left door. Left door. Okay, then it's the right, thanks for the tip. I finished saying as I mounted Labyrinth once more, and made my way past both into the right door. Yet just as I was about to cross it, Janice appeared before me again. Are you sure this is one that you want to use? They both said simultaneously, their eerie voice echoing through the chamber in the labyrinth. Pretty sure yet, after all you already answered me which door would be the right one, since of the face that tells the truth says left, it means that the person who lied would tell me to take left. If the person who lied also said left, that means that the door which the face that tells the truth would have said the right door. So yeah, riddle done, and I'm going through the door. Wait, don't go yet. Their voices echoed, but I paid them no heed. See, I told you we shouldn't have gone with the lying one and the truthful one. You were the one who said we should do it. Nah, you, hey. I could hear them both continue to bicker. I paid them no heed, and continued going through the tunnel, but it wasn't long before Janice reappeared in front of me. What now? I asked, almost bored with the god in front of me. Come on, it's the first time in almost a century a person has entered the labyrinth, entertains us a bit more. Being done with their presence, I decided to simply get rid of them. Omicron pi lambda iota omicron nu sigma beta sigma omicron nu tau phi sigma omicron upsilon, opal dim your light. The darkness which was plentiful in the dark labyrinth tunnels heard my call. My sclera and pupils turned black, even Swiper and Labyrinth shivered as they sensed my growing power. I teleport behind the gods of doorways, clutching its two faces in my hand and slamming it into the labyrinth floor. Boom! I already played your stupid game, Janice, so leave me alone. I snarled, using one of the newest abilities I had been able to create in the Underworld. They say you can see the beginning and the end of time. Let's see if you can still do that after this. Shadowy threads escaped my fingernails, making their way into the god's eyes on both faces. Their pupils disappeared as I raised my hand from his head. I stepped back, wondering if my job had worked. Janice slowly rose, raising his hands towards his face. What have you done to us? The faces whispered, though I still clearly heard them, as their words bounced off the walls. We can't see, we can't see. Janice yelled, now clawing at his face. Damn, you overreact. I was blind for 4 years, it wasn't that bad. You sunty understand, boy, we are gods of choices, we can't see your choices. Well, isn't that good for me? I replied, shadowy tendrils raising from the walls, ceilings, and floors, ensnaring him, the barbs on the tendrils plunging into his skin. I summoned my spear and plunged it into the god's heart, before he turned into a puff of smoke. Ha 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 ha. Yet just as I killed the last god, a high squeak laugh started permeating through the tunnel. Oh great, what is that now? I muttered as I let go my control from the shadows. After all, while experimenting with it in the Underworld with the help of my father, I realized something: my body couldn't seem to handle the power, not in a my skin disintegrated kind of way, but simply that the more I used it, the more strain I would have on my body once I left this state of power. Jolly good show, brother, jolly good show. The voice echoed as my eyes started feeling slightly hazy. Labyrinth ran behind me, catching me with its torso. Master, are you okay? She asked in a worried tone. Swiper too started clawing at my neck with his paws, almost as if he was trying to keep me awake. Realizing that someone was trying to pout me to sleep, I kept on remembering the phrase that gave me power. Again and again I repeated it, but slowly my eyes closed. Universal dreamscape. Jolly good show indeed. I've never seen Janice manhandled like that before. Okay, who are you? I interrupted. Oh step bro, it feels truly sad you can't recognize your own brother. He answered, turning his head away while raising his hand to his mouth almost like a crying drama queen. Hypno, stop laughing like that, you are a primogenitor, act like one. A feminine voice rumbled across the space, the figure of a woman with bat-like wings, and fair features appearing before me, a teenager with eagle-like wings on his shoulders appearing at her side. Welcome Ozzy, it's nice to finally see the newest of my children. Greek myth fact, Janus was considered the animistic spirit of doorways, Janui, and archways, Yoni. According to legend, Janus and the nymph Comasene were the parents of Tiberinus, whose death in or by the river Albula led to the renaming of the river as Tiber. The worship of Janus dates back to the time of Romulus, even before the actual founding of the city of Rome. Janus is usually depicted as having two faces, which symbolize his dual nature. He presided over the beginning and ending of conflict, making him associated with both war and peace. The gates of a building in Rome named after him, not a temple, as it is often called, but an open enclosure with gates at each end, were opened in times of war and closed to mark the arrival of peace. As a god of transitions, Janus had functions related to birth, journeys, an exchange. His association with Port Eunice, another harbor and gateway god, connected him to traveling, trading, and shipping. Janus had no specialized priest assigned to him, but the king of the sacred rites himself carried out his ceremonies. His ubiquitous presence in religious ceremonies throughout the year meant that he was ritually invoked at the beginning of each ceremony, regardless of the main deity honored on any particular occasion. The name Innis comes from Latin, meaning arched passage or doorway. It is cognate with words in other languages, such as Sanskrit, Lithuanian, and Irish, all related to the concept of going or passing through. The month of January is named after Janus, emphasizing his role as the god of beginnings and transitions. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here https://discord.gg/j2n4c5v7. Chapter 60, More Family. Universal Dreamscape. So why exactly did you drag me in here? I asked, cocking my head to the side. I thought it was about time that I met you. After all, you are my brother husband's son and therefore you are my own as well. You are taking this much better than I thought you would have. I replied sincerely. After all, if your husband from the beginning you of time, ended up having a mortal kid with another woman, I think almost anyone would be mad about that. Oh, don't worry, Ozzy. Nyx said, her form becoming smaller until she was almost the same height as me, placing her stone-cold hand on my head. Feeling her hand through my hair, I didn't know how I knew, but I knew if she wanted to kill me, no one, not even my father, would be able to stop her. Mother, can I go now? Hypnos whined behind her. With a tired sight, my stepmother replied with an almost tired sigh, fine Hypnos, you can leave us, still we will have a talk later. Cool, he replied, making finger guns. Nice to meet you, bro, but I have some kids to put to sleep. Hypnos' boyish form was encircled by his eagle-like wings, dissipating into a puff of smoke. Seriously, when is he going to grow up? Nyx said, shaking her head at the gods of sleep childlike demeanor. Just wondering, but is he gonna torment some children's sleep? I asked. After all, the god's last sentence was disturbing to say the least. Oh, look at you, so worried about the mortals, but no, isn't going to torment mortal children. He calls all mortals children. After all, compared to us in our lifespan, even the oldest of mortals would be no more than a baby. Well then, let's stop talking about Hypnos. After all, I came all this way from my house in Tartarus to visit you. Nyx added, a smile gracing her lips, making her look more beautiful than before. Honestly, I wondered if even Aphrodite could compare to her beauty. Don't think like that, Ozzy, that's what started the Trojan War. I thought, bringing my head back to the words of the woman in front of me. So Ozzy, what are you doing in the labyrinth? After all, it isn't some place most mortals come to by choice. Labor from dead. I replied concisely, almost instantaneously, not wanting to do anything that could earn her ire. One of the two reasons mortals come in here, I see, but don't worry about the labyrinth. After all, the labyrinth and fate are closely intertwined. If the thing you are searching for is here, then you'll find it, if not. She trailed off, her hand still stroking my hair, in a rhythmic manner. She then began asking me questions exactly the same as the ones my actual mother had asked me. Though there were moments that I had to tread closely when she asked me about Achilles, but even she seemed to not mind her daughter's death, or temporary death for that matter. After all, there was almost no way to actually kill a primordial without the help of another primordial. A little advice from stepmom: the labyrinth is filled with malice, yet it is also filled with monsters and darkness. Use those to your advantage. After all, in the labyrinth only night exists. With that final piece of advice, she snapped her slender fingers. The space shattered around us. I saw how a house of drons with heads of different monsters and daimons appeared behind Nyx before she entered, and when I rose again I was back in the labyrinth, Labyrinth and Swiper by my side. Well, that was something. I muttered, going my head laying against Labyrinth's back. Master, are you okay? Labyrinth woofed, yeah, I'm fine, just some run-in with the family. Oh, did Grandmaster call you? Swiper asked, his ears perching up at my words. No, it was someone else, but that doesn't matter. After all, what happened has already happened. I slowly stood up, still feeling wobbly, probably because of being forcefully taken into a dream that wasn't my own. All right, guys, I said, once more getting on Labyrinth's back. Let's keep moving. The labyrinth was a sprawling, ever-changing maze. Walls shifted and floors tilted, creating new paths and dead ends at a whim. We had been walking for what felt like hours when we stumbled upon something unusual. The stone corridor opened into a vast cavern, and in the center of it was a strange, almost village-like setup. The houses were made of twisted wood and stone, meticulously put together. Almost like someone had had too much time on their hands. The air was thick with the scent of hay and something else, something metallic and salty, blood. As we stepped closer, I noticed what seemed to be the only inhabitants. Horses roamed freely, their eyes glinting with a hunger that mirrored the red auras surrounding them. Their coats were matted, their hooves cracked and stained. They moved in packs, teeth bared, snarling at their companions, trying to take bites out of each other. Some even succeeded. Suddenly, a man appeared from behind one of the structures. His eyes widened in shock, his reddish aura flared, and he yelled, "Intruder!" Before I could react, dozens of wild-looking men and women materialized out of thin air, some riding the horses I had been avoiding, others on the top of structures, weapons in hand. They were dressed in regal clothing, still their eyes were feral, like they hadn't seen the sun in years. Weapons made of bone and metal gleamed in their hands as they encircled us. A man with sunken eyes, literally I mean the dude had no eyes, simply sockets with bloody tears stretching down his face, yelled, his voice thundering across the makeshift village, "Odysseus, it has been too long." Greek myth fact: Hypnos was the god or personified spirit of sleep. He dwelt in Erebus, the land of eternal darkness beyond the gates of the rising sun, and rose into the sky each night in the train of his mother Nyx, Night. Hypnos was often paired with his twin brother Thanatos, peaceful death, and the Oniiroi, dreams, were his brothers or sons. Hypnos was depicted as a young man with wings on his shoulders or brow. His attributes included either a horn of sleep-inducing opium, a poppy stem, a branch dripping water from the river Lethe, forgetfulness, or an inverted torch. Author note: my Patreon is Joan Judo Stories. I have advanced chapters, secondary novels, and more on there. You can also join my Discord through here, https://discord.gg/J2N4C5V7.
Thanks for listening.